Did we go?
We goed.
We go.
We're live. Hello,
Hello,
everyone.
everybody.
There's lots of people here today, which is nice. Lots of folks from early on. As usual, guys, let us know how the sound is and if there are any things that we need to adjust. But this is in lieu of our usual Saturday or otherwise scheduled live streams. We had something go out
Scheduled
yesterday.
my butt.
I mean, they're usually on Saturdays. Expected live streams. How about that? So today I figured what we could do is talk about the topic of what is accuracy in headphones. And we can get into that because there's a lot to talk about there. And so we'll do that for an hour, and then we'll get into spicy hour. As usual.
An hour.
Oh, yeah. Spicy a certain amount of time. It's like the way that, people talk about like a lunch hour, but it's never actually an hour.
I've never had an hour-long lunch in my life.
I don't think I have either. So we're going to do that. Sound
People
good?
were apparently interested because someone was in the chat at 1 p.m. Now that's patience. That's a lot better than we do.
Yeah.
I was barely here 10 minutes ago.
Someone says turn Blaine up a bit, so I did that just now.
I have also turned Blaine up a bit.
You are maxed in Discord and also in...
Well, I'm clipping on hardware on my side. Are you sure that there's not something with the capture on your side that's
You are
wonky?
maxed. You are maxed. I have a solution. I have a solution. Hold on a second. Let me turn you up digitally. How about now?
Hello.
Oh god, that's so loud. All right, I got it. I got
Hello?
you. I got you.
Oh, let me lower it on my side so that I stop analog clipping.
Okay, sounds good. Blaine. Oh, I did not read that correctly, Capra.
Blaine speaks softly and carries a big stick.
Yes.
Like my favorite Roosevelt.
Yeah, okay. So the solution is digital audio, and I'm turning you down on my app. So, okay, we should be good.
Wait, is the whole reason that you have me adjust so that I'm not too loud for just you?
No, I don't care about that. You are quiet for just me. I want you to be even with me for the stream.
All right.
That's the goal. And right now, on my levels, it shows that everything is even Steven. So, guys, let us know if this is good.
What is accuracy and volume control?
Yeah.
Well, no, we know that one. It's unity gain.
So, okay, but hold on. Before we get too far into this topic, let me just first shout out headphones.com that makes all of this possible. That's where all of our written content is. It's up on the audio files. And actually, I have a new feature there, the Wall of Fame, if you guys haven't seen that yet. I know I'm aping Tile's Wall of Fame with that, but that was basically what I was thinking of when putting it together, so check that out. And then also let me know if you disagree. That's the whole point. And then also check out our forum and our Discord. Those will be linked in the description. And without further ado, let's get started on the topic. What is accuracy? Okay. I wanted to approach this. Well, first of all, let me start by just saying, how was your weekend, Mr. Blaine Lacrosse?
I mean, it's been a weekend.
It's been a weekend.
I don't really have big complaints. I spent some time hanging out with some folks who I care about. I fucking lost a lot at Teamfight Tactics because a couple friends of mine were playing it and they made me play, and I'm terrible at it.
Okay. What is Teamfight Tactics?
It would take a long time to explain. It's a mini game in League of Legends, I guess. Or alternatively, it's like a tiny strategy game in League of Legends.
Ooh.
You wouldn't like it.
Okay.
It's like the opposite of what you like.
Does it have weebs? Or
Well, League of Legends is kind of weeby, yeah.
Okay.
But also it's turn-based and the units cannot be controlled. It's an auto battler. Anyway. But yeah, how was your weekend?
Good. I had some company come over and from the interior, and so it's good to see them. And they brought their adorable dog, as was the dog I posted up on Twitter for those who saw it. And I had a nice evening hanging out with the dog. It's a corgi mixed with a German Shepherd, I think, which is adorable.
Is it small or is it big?
Small. It's a small dog, but I've always wanted to have a dog, but because I live, in the city, it's especially here, like no apartments let you have pets. It's weird, or very few do. So, and it doesn't make sense because usually, pet owners are more responsible. Not saying I would be, but I've always wanted to have a dog, and so because I can't, it was nice that my friends came over with a dog. So yeah.
Is it a Korgerd or a Shepke?
Yes. um.
Right.
So yeah. So that was my
So
weekend. It was very nice.
I'm glad. I'm
Yeah,
glad.
yeah. But now to the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Accuracy.
So
Accuracy.
we're trying to do a thing just to let you all know where we'll be jumping around a little bit less in topics and having a little bit longer dialogues about them. Sometimes it'll roam, obviously, but it's just something where
Well, okay, that's ambitious. I mean, like, there's no scenario where I'm able to not go off on a crazy tangent that lasts for 10 minutes.
well, yeah, the thing is not jumping from one topic to another. We'll go on tangents, but the tangent should sort of still be around the original topic. And as long as we can manage that, I think we're okay.
I mean, this is all right.
Oh, come on. How Jesus, you're such an Eeyore.
Yes, Eeyore is my spirit animal. All
Oh my gosh.
right.
I like to think I'm Owl. Anyway,
I'm either Eeyore or Piglet.
that's a very
Specifically,
dour.
review Piglet. Okay.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
Accuracy.
Yeah,
So
accuracy.
accuracy.
Hold
I'm
on.
gonna
Let
open.
me frame this. Let me just frame why
Oh
this
yeah.
is interesting. So
Well,
I
there's a
think
lot of reasons.
it often comes up though in sort of public discourse when we're talking about the research that gets done, specifically Harman research, where people will then give the rebuttal. That's just preference. That's just what a certain amount of people preferred. It's not actually to do with accuracy. And we even saw some of this come up in. I remember I was having a dialogue with Olive from Olive's Gadgets, where he was talking about the EQ and reference curves and what is neutral and all that kind of stuff. And his complaint was that even if something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing here, but like even if the bass to treble delta is somewhere in the middle, that's still not necessarily accurate, and accuracy is super important. I don't want to put words into his mouth, so it's not exactly what he said, but that's sort of what I took from it. And I really got a sense from that, plus a lot of other conversations on this topic, that people really do like to delineate between preference, especially group preference, and quote unquote accuracy. And there are interesting ways to think about it in that sort of like separated way, but I want to get your sense of like, does it even make sense to separate those conceptually, or should we be talking about quote unquote accuracy in terms of preference or vice versa?
Well, all right. So let's think about what we mean when we say accuracy in a normal sense, right? Like obviously, people often go to the aiming at a bullseye metaphor, right? The closer you are to the center or to whatever point you're aiming at, the more accurate you are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is the bullseye of audio? Like, how is an audio device accurate? What are you judging that against? How do you judge the accuracy of audio reproduction? And I really actually kind of take some issue with the phrase reproduction because I think that that's where a lot of the misconception starts. Like I'm going to put cards on the table here to start. I think that accuracy makes essentially negative 10 cents in almost every segment of audio, with the sole exceptions being binaural audio and very specific kinds of spatial audio.
Right. So the again, I'm thinking of this where this is not necessarily my opinion, but where some of this idea may come from is if you listen to something that where you go, okay, well, it sounds like the playback equipment here has the right amount of bass that I like and the right amount of treble that I like, but something about the way that this song sounds, these particular instruments don't sound the way that they do in real life, for example, and that's the fault of the playback equipment.
Well, and this one gets us into a very dangerous, or at least very difficult little area. Because I think a lot of people have this conception. I think Olive has this conception as an example, and it's something that I've tried to talk to him about quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Of if you had an ideal microphone and an ideal signal converter, an ideal speaker or a headphone, you put the microphone with, a singer and a guitar, you record, the singer and the guitar, you play it back, and it will sound exactly the same. And the thing is, that's impossible, right?
Hmm.
And that's sort of the sticky wicket of the whole thing. You actually can't perfectly reproduce the sound of something in any space with one microphone, and it gets very difficult to do it still with many microphones.
Hmm.
The reason for this in the most simple form for speakers is because sound radiates differently from different objects. Even like the shape of my lips changes how sound radiates from it.
Hmm.
And that's a continuous process while we make sound. And the problem is that we make sound with a lot more than just our lips as well. So to make something that sounded like a human, if I put a speaker in a room, put it behind a curtain and said, is that the real human there, or is it a reproduction of that real human? You would need something that was continually changing not only the sound, like the frequency response, but the pattern of the sound's radiation.
Someone
And
says, lips.
lips.
Yeah, continue.
And it's a pretty salient one because someone's immediately saying, there isn't tears. It's like saying there isn't tears of accuracy in images, but the thing is, I mean, how are we defining accuracy?
Well, it's
You can
accurate to
set,
what? Like,
yeah, like
what is the thing that is being reproduced?
probably the closest analog to, like, for example, image color and saturation accuracy would be frequency response, for example.
Well,
But you can have a recording that has the same balance of colors, which will not sound like
right.
of frequencies, which is also what colors are. Uh, but it won't sound the same as being there in person.
Yeah. So like, I think it's like, okay, if you were there in person and you saw the thing, how close to that image can you get with the photo?
Well, but the thing
Um,
is, you aren't going to get that close with a photo because a photo has like a fixed perspective. It's got
yeah,
the
totally,
effect of the
absolutely,
lens,
absolutely.
and
I mean, you would
the
probably
thing.
shoot it with a 50 millimeter, right? You would get it to be as close to what the human eye kind of generally tends to see, and you would try and do something along those lines. Um, and in that sense, I do tend to think that there is still some sort of boundary where, with the playback equipment, how to put this, as long as things are reasonable, HRTFE in that sense, you're not going to be too far out of whack, but you can never perfectly accommodate every recording. That's
Well,
sort of my
I
sense there.
I mean, I'm gonna push a little bit back there. Like
Sure.
with a photo, is there any photo that is the same as the reality? I mean, I know that I'm rehashing the bit from the treachery of images here, but there isn't, right? Like no picture actually makes you think that you are looking through a window.
But there's no intentionality behind it, but that gets weirdly philosophical.
Well, I mean,
You obviously know you're looking at a picture. So,
well, exactly. And the thing is, we acknowledge that pictures are art, right? That they're a representation, that
yes.
they're not the thing in itself.
Yes, but you can still get, again, this is why 50 millimeter lenses are commonly used to try and, uh, get a reasonable. They're not. Nobody there is saying this is perfectly what the eye sees, but they're saying this is reasonably close to what the human perspective is,
Yeah, exactly.
at a reason at a common distance, right? And then you
Well,
can do the same
it's
with colors and whatever else.
an analogy here would be perspective in drawn art, right? Like generally speaking, we go with something that isn't too alien to what we actually perceive because that alienness can be unpleasant to
Yes,
people,
yes,
right? But nobody mistakes the drawing for reality, and the drawing is only accurate to reality insofar as it is less weird to us. It's not that it
yeah.
actually reproduces the thing itself.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think it's pretty important because I think a lot of people do think that you can actually get the sound of something, right? Like that you can actually make it sound either A, like you are in a place, or B, like a sound source is in your room.
Yeah, or even wow. Okay, I don't know, but so there's the in your room aspect, but I think what people are chasing, or when they're trying to achieve accuracy, is to get it so that the oboe sounds like the oboe that they heard in real life, or that the trumpet or whatever sounds like the trumpet that they've heard, that they can recognize, and specifically in cases where, for whatever reason, it doesn't sound like that, and they can point to the playback equipment as being at fault, you know, uh, then it's reason enough to go and try finding something else that's going to better represent, and in that respect, I think understandably more accurately, the oboe or whatever else it is that's being played. And I think in most cases people are disregarding the recording aspect of it. They're not thinking of, well, maybe a different recording would sound differently and potentially more accurate with this existing playback equipment.
Yeah, and I mean, I get the premise here of, you're referencing off of a real experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I really still don't think that that qualifies as accuracy, because I've heard two oboes. They didn't sound the same. I've
You've
heard the
heard,
same guitar in two rooms. It
yeah,
didn't sound the same.
yeah.
So it's an area where I think the term accuracy is kind of misused to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something that leads people on a lot of wild goose chases because, again, nobody's expecting a cinematographer to literally give you the experience of standing somewhere, right? It's an artistic thing. It has a point of view. It has a style. It has the editing that it has intended to give a certain impression and a certain effect, right? But it's trying to create a reaction in a person.
Okay, but here's
Yeah.
where I'm going to push back a little bit because, and by the way, I do agree with you by and large on this topic. But just I'm trying to do the little bit of the devil's advocate here. Um,
Mhm.
with
Oh no, please. Always.
with cinematography and photography, there's a pretty strong difference between trying to do what, like a, heavily stylized kind of take on a particular scene or whatever it is, or say in photography, a particularly distorted perspective to create an effect, and trying to more quote unquote faithfully reproduce that image. And this is we even get like to the most basic sense of it. If you look at the videos that I try and make compared to the ones that DMS tries to make compared to the ones that Josh Valor tries to make, etc. Like you can look at all the various different styles that we have, and we each try and do a different style, but you can clearly tell when one style is being intentionally affected. And it's trying to be more artistic and stylized and editorialized, let's say, and another one that is trying to be a little bit more faithful to what it may look like in that given situation. Not to say that one is better than the other. I mean, I have this debate with DMS all the time. I think that 30 frames a second is better for this kind of thing, and 24 is better for cinema. And I think it's precisely because it is less choppy, and we're not as choppy in real life. um,
Yeah, well, I mean, I absolutely agree that there's a style that is less, and you can pick your word for this, right? I would, you could say colored, you could say stylized. I like stylized because there are a lot of very stylized recordings and there's a lot of very
mhm.
stylized film, right? Where But there's also, there's a lot of drawn art that is hyper realistic. The
Right.
whole
Yeah.
thing is to attempt to have as little visible styling as
Yeah,
you
you
can.
can. Yeah, you can. Exactly. And so for me, I look at this stuff not necessarily as like, uh, um, a perfect representation versus not a perfect representation, and more along the lines of like a continuum, which is again a flawed, analogy, but like a continuum where you have like heavily stylized or editorialized or whatever on the one side, and closer to or in the direction of a more quote unquote faithful representation of whatever it is. And I think we do that in photography, but also in artwork of any kind. Um, and I would say that a photo of something is closer to the more faithful representation of that thing, or less stylized, let's call it, or where the style itself is to be more realistic. How about that, right? And a painting is often not, especially with certain styles of art.
I mean, I would agree with that. I like, I don't think that we're like at cross purposes there as such, because I would acknowledge, like, usually the intentionality of a photo is to have less of a style
Yeah.
than, and I mean, there are exceptions, obviously. There are people who do very artsy things with photography, but in general, the fact remains that the intention of a photo is to create, well, a piece of art, right?
Yeah.
It's not to, and you know, that piece
Unless you're
of
doing
art
media.
may be sending a message. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But the reason that I'm kind of harping on this, though, is that I know that this is a kind of pedantic one, but it does kind of matter because there is the question of referencing here, right? Like, what are we saying
Hmm.
is when we're saying, accurate, well, what's accuracy? Is it, this thing that this reproduction is different in these respects by how much from the original, for example? Like,
And
thinking about
those
it in the copy of a copy view.
and those things are difficult to pin down, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, it means that you have to think about what your actual reference point is and what the deviations you care about are, right?
Yeah.
Like any normal image completely loses stereoscopic depth, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's just like a dimension of accuracy that is completely kaput instantly. Um, which is true also of audio, right? But there are ways of doing both photography and audio that preserve that. But we also don't usually see people saying, "Oh, this is, I'm in pursuit of an accurate sound, therefore I'm going to build a giant ambisonic speaker setup." I mean,
Yeah.
like 5 people have probably, and they're probably the ones who buy all 5 of the ambisonic albums that sell every year. But
Yeah.
for the majority of us, we're
No,
listening to stereo, right?
stereo. Yeah, I get what you're saying in that sense, and I think in a similar way, I mean, as what you were just saying about like we're all somewhat there's always some sort of deviation. I think yeah, when it comes to the visual analogy or audio, there are certain things that we're okay with because we accept the given paradigm of whatever the medium is, and in if we're talking about most audio being in stereo, that's the thing that we're okay with. So we're going to make concessions no matter what there. And with the photo, it's not it's not a VR headset. You're looking at a photo.
Or a film, right? A
Yeah,
film
yeah, yeah,
isn't VR,
yeah.
and there's
Exactly.
very few films that you can watch. And I imagine this will probably change, right? There may be some,
Yeah,
but very few films can you look around in, right? Very few
yeah.
films can you change the perspective, and for a long time, no films, um, because that would be very hard. I mean, yes, technically you could do it with holograms. It's practically it didn't exist. And the thing is, in that scenario, where do we base accuracy? Because, if you stood in the position of the microphone, if you stood in the position of the camera for those films, you aren't going to have the same experience that you will have in the theater. Um,
Right.
so the
So
there's a risk of Review says there's a risk of going too postmodern. I don't know. I don't think this is postmodern. Is it?
is what postmodern?
This dialogue.
Are we pomomofos?
I mean, I'm
I don't
sort
think
of.
so. I don't think this is
I
postmodern.
consider myself postmodern, really, but
I consider myself an antique. So to get to the specific, like this topic surrounding headphones, I use the headphones and the amplifier
yeah.
in the thumbnail for a reason, because that's a scenario where I don't think anybody would really suggest that that's you know like accurate in a referencey sense.
Well, and
What's
by
going on there?
referencey, you mean it's recreating some
Yeah.
reference condition.
It is closer to, well, it is somewhere along the continuum, but not exactly closer to the uh, faithfully reproducing whatever side
Well,
of
but
things.
what is faithful here? Like, is
No, no,
is
in
that
in the
faith?
photography sense, like imagining
Oh,
you were there. Um, it is. Let's okay. How about this? It is closer to the stylized side of the continuum.
yeah.
And I mean, we're all generally under the assumption that that's okay for people to do, but at the same time, there is a goodness to the other side, the less stylized side, the more, let's say, normal
Oh, yeah.
side of
I
things.
mean,
And
we have a boatload of evidence that people generally prefer it.
yeah, exactly. Um, if you could talk about that a little bit.
I just one thing I want to say first because this is super cool and I hadn't heard about this. Admiral Norman said, watching Blade Runner 2049 in VR, you feel like you're standing next to the camera while they were filming.
Well, that's weird.
That sounds like a really intriguing experience. Man, that's actually, I think, one of the first things that's made me actually kind of want VR. Anyway, that not that it would be more, well, I mean, I guess it is more accurate in a sense there. That'd be a really interesting one.
Here's one of my tangents on this topic. I think I've mentioned this before, but that sentence reminds me of when I was in undergrad. I went to some weird art installation that was
Oh
meant
no.
to. It was meant to. It was something where you had to walk through a given space, walk up a set of stairs, put on this weird headset thing, and it was meant to induce nausea. So it was a nausea-inducing art installation, and it was effective.
Wow, it had a goal and it hit it.
Yeah, exactly. So those are my favorite kinds of art pieces, the ones that induce nausea.
Don't you
Anyways,
have enough of that in your life?
I do. Yeah.
Daniel Christosek says, "Isn't this what MQA was supposed to be? Like, hey, this is an actual representation of the way it was supposed to sound in the studio." So that was a pretty prominent part of MQA's marketing. And there may be specific recordings where MQA includes post-processing that is additional to just their compression algorithms. But by and large, what MQA is simply a way of packaging audio data, which is not lossy at CD quality, but does lose a small bit of high resolution and low bit depth, like high bit depth information. So it's mostly just a compression scheme. Well, it's mostly just a content encoding scheme. I'm not actually sure that it gains you anything in terms of size.
However, perceptually, people's enjoyment of MQA and what their expectations are around it are a Gettier case.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is actually, and this is one thing that I was going to poke on about the headphones in the example, because I know a lot of people, mostly I'd say this is older people, but I've encountered a lot of people who think that tube amplifiers are more accurate for the way they use the word accurate.
Oh
And
yeah, they mean like unaffected or something. Like it is more natural somehow.
so I think, I mean, and this is conjecture about someone else's internal states, so but from what they've said, what they've generally said to me seems to be, the emotional experience of music I have
Yeah.
with this amplifier is closer to the emotional experience of music I have with it live. And so that's how they're referencing it. That's what they're saying. Oh, what am I internally experiencing on an emotional level about this rather than any quantifiable aspect of the sound?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of interesting because it sticks in my craw immediately, right? Like saying, oh, hey, this amplifier that objectively has a boatload of distortion, that objectively changes the frequency response is more accurate. But then I sit back and say, well, I mean, if they're referencing it that way, if they're saying this is more accurate to my experience, then I mean anything can
Well,
be,
but
right?
this gets back to what we were saying at the very beginning of this stream before we even started, where we were talking about vinyl,
Yeah.
where for some people that it's the whole ritual of it all and all of that stuff brings with it that state of being, which is going to be maybe be more accurate in the emotional sense, right? If that's what we're talking about, because it brings that similar kind of experience to that person. But it could be, the point is that it could be for any reason. It could be for completely non auditory reasons even.
So it's interesting to note that way up in there, Super Review said you can live an entire audiophile career and never care about or use the word accuracy, arguably get used mostly as a justification for preferences, as a sort of naturalistic fallacy. And I do think that he has kind of nailed it on the head there.
Yeah.
Like you can wind around and question, well, what is it accurate to? But a lot of the time people do definitely use accurate as a synonym for I like it and it's better than the thing you like.
100%. Yeah. But I want to take this to the question about DFHRTFs.
Oh God.
But
Must we go there immediately?
well, we don't have to if you want to.
Well, no, I
do
mean, so
further
all
on
right,
this.
HRTFs. Let's hear.
Well, I suppose we apply a tilt or a slope for good reason. People don't like, very clearly. Nobody would really say this isn't a preference thing. People don't prefer straight up DF. They prefer a downward tilt of some kind, right? Um, Obviously, maybe there's like a few people who do, but in general, the largest segments are the ones that are slightly tilted. Um, so I think it makes sense for people why we tilt DF.
Well, and I mean, tilting is just one way to represent, like, and this is something we've probably been remiss in talking about. One thing I realized while chatting with listener Griffin was we don't talk enough about Lorho, whose big
Thank you.
conclusion, right? What? What?
I think we should talk more about Lorho. No,
Fair enough.
I'm not saying that I want a
Well,
Lorho target or anything
well,
like
no,
that.
no.
I'm just
But
saying
I
the
mean,
research itself.
yeah, no, it
It's
was a
preference
good
research.
paper.
Yeah,
And the funny thing about Lorho's result, right, is that he found that people wanted almost no ear gain.
yeah.
Um,
But that's
and a lot
because
of people. Oh, sorry. Go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say that's because of the starting point.
Right. So a lot of people think, oh, well, that makes it irreconcilable with the Harman research, right? This is referencing Gaetan Lorho, which is, oh, shoot, I should remember the actual
So
name of the paper, 2009.
yeah, but the story is
Um,
basically that he used, how like Harman uses two filters for preference research, bass and treble, and technically it changed for the ear gain, but that's a little footnote. With Lorho, it was just one filter, and it was for ear gain
so, and it's
specifically.
important to note, Lorho started with an acoustically flat headphone. Like
Yeah,
he equalized a set of headphones to be flat, measured on a Hats, and then he gave people a single peak filter to adjust the ear gain. And what he found was that people wanted very little ear gain. And a lot of people have said think of that as sort of contradictory to the Harman result, which is people want a fair amount of ear gain, but also a fair amount of bass. But in general, the alternative reading of that, and something that generally seems to be, I would say, reasonably well supported in the Harman work itself, is people consider basically treble and bass to be substitutes to an extent. And when they had no ability to raise bass, the preference was okay, well, we need less treble so that it still sounds relatively right.
yeah, and all of this is the same. Is why I think there's something to Clinical's point about Harman, i.e., 2019.
I mean, there's a
And
scenario, right?
yeah,
Like,
we don't know for sure, but like, yeah, it's an interesting hypothesis. I see all of that as kind of like similar. There are potential similar reasons, right? Because and those reasons are for those outcomes, and those reasons are that people don't just think about one particular range in a vacuum. It's all within the relationship to everything else. And
I
as
mean, human are relative creatures.
yeah, and as Sean even pointed out in the interview we did with him, if we were talking about Lorho, if you allow people to affect the bass and the treble, you would you're also kind of in essence affecting the mids. So it makes a certain amount of sense. Also, Lorho is, we don't know this for sure, but he works for Apple now, and that may be the reason why the AirPods Max it has significantly less ear gain. It's likely.
I wouldn't go that far.
That's
It
Clinical's
may be.
hypothesis. It's not. Yeah, we don't know for sure.
We do know that Gaetan Lorho works for Apple,
Yeah.
and we do know that the AirPods Max measure closer to Lorho's target than to most other targets. But that doesn't mean that those two things are connected.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Um. Okay, so again, Daniel asks, most recordings use the classic MDR V6, which are the ones I own. So wouldn't those be the most accurate since those are what's used for mixing for decades? Well, and that's sort of the thing, right? If your definition of accuracy is what the mixing engineer heard, then yeah.
I
Um,
okay. However,
yeah.
we recently did. Okay. You don't necessarily
Funnily
know.
enough, Daniel just asked a question that will be directly answered by one of our videos.
Yes. So I was going to give away a little bit of that video.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we found was you can't know for sure what the mixing engineer, whoever was doing that, wanted. Because in the situation where you have the same playback equipment as them, it may actually sound worse than if you were to have it on something else. Or sorry, I should
Well,
say, you don't know if what they wanted was actually
what
something
you
that's going to
want.
sound good, yeah, to you.
That's
Yeah,
that. Well, you also it's two separate horrible problems. It's one, you don't know what they actually wanted versus what they achieved.
yeah,
Two, you don't know if
yeah,
you
yeah,
want what they wanted,
yeah.
which
So
is a real pain in the butt.
yeah, exactly. And that is something that was good. A video we're working on demonstrates that quite clearly. um, but and in that one, I mean, I think actually Chrono released a short on it already, where people could go to the forum thread and check out all the different versions of that mix. The actual final mix, I believe, was done on speakers. I could be wrong about that, but I believe it was done. You know,
I would hope so.
yeah, yeah. I don't think it was done by the person in the video. So the official one that's on Spotify, I think, is done on speakers.
So there's a question here about what if my ears don't respond the same way as the mixing engineer, and I do think that one's a bit of a red herring.
My ears don't respond the same way, meaning HRTF would be,
Well, it depends on how you read it, right? Like I'm reading it as head related transfer
yeah.
function, right? Like I have a different, you measure my head in a whatever field, you measure their head, they measure different. So clearly we must prefer different things. Thing is, we don't actually have evidence that supports that, and we do have evidence that contradicts that.
Because I was going to
Because
say that just because HRTFs are different doesn't mean that we prefer different things.
exactly.
Yeah,
So because preferences are heterogeneous, but they're not heterogeneous in a way that we can identify as being because of HRTF. Like
yeah.
it's not like we're all trying to correct against the balance of our own
Right,
ears.
because we're normalizing this shit anyways.
Well, and because we're used to sound on our own
Yeah,
ears, right? Like
exactly.
if your eyes for whatever reason saw green twice as intensely as normal, you wouldn't be like, "Man, I really want an extremely green deficient screen," because then it'd be like, "Wow, this doesn't look anything
No,
like the
because you're used
world."
to that.
Yeah.
This is yeah. The problem of qualia rears its head.
Well, I
Once
mean,
again.
yes, we inevitably end up talking about inevitably end up talking about Nagel and fucking how am I forgetting his name? Frank
Well, Frank Jackson?
yeah, Frank Jackson.
Yeah, yeah. Um but no, I mean there's lots. The qualia well goes deep and we don't need to get into that. But yeah, what were we just talking about before that? The HR. Oh yeah, I was gonna ask. Maybe a better one would be that if the headphone to ear transfer function is significantly changing things, you
Okay,
know.
so I think that that's one where it's interesting to talk about accuracy in another definition, right?
Sure.
Because I'd like to make this as hard to follow as possible so that we can get down to like 50 viewers.
We're only going up.
Um,
This is the destination. This is for the real fans.
so when we talk about accuracy, we have a lot of, it's a very loaded term. I think, as said, I think Super kind of put his, I think that Mr. Super, owner of
Mr.
Mr.
Super.
Super Reviews,
Yeah.
um, that MRF's really put his finger on it, right? With a lot of people just use it as basically a rhetorical tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
some some people use it to mean as the studio, as it was in the studio
With okay, I do think that there are
with.
exceptions. The further to either side of the continuum you go, well, specifically in the stylized direction, because there are people who I'm thinking again of Taryn and his Toyota Tercel with the massive subwoofer. He probably doesn't think that that's accurate, but he still likes it for whatever reason, right?
Well, so it's a subset, right? It's not saying 100% of
Yeah,
claims of I like this or claims of this is accurate. It's saying that 100% of claims of this is accurate are also saying I like this.
I got you. Yep, 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 yep.
So,
Not all dogs are German shepherds.
yeah, Greeks, Cretans. So, but and this did come up lamentably for the 7 millionth time over the weekend, the question of accuracy in measurements, right?
Mm.
Um, and I do want to touch on that a little bit because I think people do get it a bit wrong that something that is a more accurate in measurement device necessarily is more predictive of experience, right? Um, the question of measuring accurately, as I said, it's the same as all the rest of them, except the nice thing about measurability is that you actually have a reference, right? So if you say, oh, this is measurably more accurate, you're saying, I have a reference. I can show how much this deviates from it. That's the
Yeah,
inaccuracy.
yeah.
When we talk about that with measuring headphones, usually what we're talking about is measuring frequency response, and the reference point is either a single or a average of a human head, right?
Well, I mean, ideally.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's people who just measure headphone frequency response with a free field mic, but for people who are trying to be accurate,
Yeah.
we're generally trying to be accurate to the actual response on an actual human because actual humans are the people who listen to
Yes.
these things
Yeah.
generally. Um, but the trouble of that is, well, there's a few trouble points. The biggest pain point and the most obvious one is that we are all different humans, right? Like my ear may interact differently with a given speaker than yours, and that would change, and potentially in ways that you couldn't infer just from a single HRTF as well, which is annoying, the response that each of us get from that speaker, and the same for headphones.
Hmm.
And that's what Andrew is calling HPTF and HRTF here. HPTF is shorthand in the literature for headphone transfer function, and it's often used to describe a measurement of a headphone done on a head, versus a head-related transfer function, which is a measurement of a head with a microphone on the head using a speaker as a reference, right? So you're saying, okay, well, this is how the head behaves versus this is how the headphone behaves.
Hmm.
And in general, the model that we have for how humans perceive sound is that our brain has an HRTF that it associates with a sound's origin, right? So if something is coming from in front of me, it will have an objectively different frequency response than even if it's just coming from like slightly to my left. But I don't perceive timbre to vary massively as my head moves a little bit, even with, a speaker, a singer, something in a room. You do perceive this a bit. This doesn't say it's a perfect process, but the variations in your HRTF there are massive. And so what that means is
At the
necessarily,
eardrum.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the response that you would get if you were just measuring frequency response or an FFT or whatever at the eardrum during that, it would be going all over the place. But if you just move your head back and forth or head bang or whatever, music doesn't change entirely in what it sounds like. In the same way that applying that same EQ to the sound would make it sound really unstable and weird.
Hmm.
Um, so because of this, we can say, okay, well, our perception of sound is in some sense based on we have where we think sound comes from, and we subtract what we expect that direction to sound like from
Hmm.
sound.
Hmm.
Um, the trouble, of course, is that two people's given HRTFs may differ in a way that, the same speaker would measure different to the two of them, right? But it would sound roughly the same. It would sound similar at least. Um, that's not necessarily true with headphones, because a headphone might well either vary in completely different ways than their HRTFs, or B, it might measure the exact same on both of them, right? Like a very deeply inserted earphone might well not have any meaningful difference between you and I, or might differ only in because like of the length of the or like of the depth of the insertion and the slight differences in ear impedance.
Sure.
But if you measured, our outer ears, they would be quite substantially different. And unfortunately, that means that in theory, the things, if our perception of, if our HRTF colors the sound, right? If something has to match our HRTF to sound uncolored, um, then that would mean that that headphone can't sound uncolored to both of us. And that's sort of an issue, right? And I know that's what you're poking on here is, what about a headphone that on a given fixture measures a certain way, but on a human's head, the perceived response differs. I mean, we've both had an experience of a headphone
Yeah.
like that, I
Yeah.
think. I would actually point specifically to the DCA Stealth. That's a headphone that,
Expanse.
oh, both actually.
Yeah. Yeah, because you heard both. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, both. Where measured, it looks pretty much bang on, right? Like it matches very well with the rise into the ear gain of the target, and you would expect it to sound, I
Well,
would
I
say,
should go
fairly smooth.
further and say that it measures similarly to other headphones with that rise into the ear gain that sound great for that region.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Like if I EQ an HG800 to that same response on hats, it does not
It's yeah,
sound
exactly.
subjectively a problem to me. But subjectively, when I listen to it, my perception of it is okay. Well, the tone of this headphone differs, and that's one where, one explanation, of course, is that I'm just crazy, or that I've been, misled by Andrew's horrible deceits. We are. I'm not really sure why you would be trying to sabotage a
Yeah.
decent margin item, but
Nah,
you know,
It's the business model.
Our business model is that the
Synth-
headphones.com business model is that we get products and then we review them badly so you don't buy them.
exactly.
And then people yell at us.
That is how this works.
It's kind of got an underpants gnome sort of vibe to it in terms of the profit, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
But no,
Um,
it could be that I was just nuts. But the alternative scenario for me being nuts or being, misled by your Svengali-ish nature was,
that's
well,
rich.
what if, huh?
I said that's rich.
Uh,
Hey,
is
I wasn't lying about that one. Probably wasn't lying about some of the other things too.
okay. So is that either A, the headphone measured meaningfully differently on my head from how it would
Yeah.
would on the measurement fixture, or B, it might have measured very much the same and my HRTF might have differed, right? So there's a scenario where, and I do think this is probably more likely actually, where at least in the high frequencies, it probably was more common between the two. And for my particular ear, I was just far enough away from it that to me it sounded like the upper mids were sucked out and then had a peak. And that's,
Sorry. Are you saying that you think that the HRTF thing is more like variation is more likely?
I think that it's more likely that it had a more similar response than the difference between the two heads in a given sound field. So I think that the headphone varied less, but that's just pure conjecture.
Right, because you're not measuring it at your own eardrum.
Yeah, well, or even at the ear entrance. Like
Yeah.
I would really like to measure headphones that have that kind of subjective response particularly with open canal probes, so that
Sure.
you can see the impact of the earlobe.
Yeah.
Not earlobe. Well, I mean, you can actually because the earlobe can break the seal on the
Yeah.
headphone, which is probably the taking this down to earth version of this. Like the simplest version of this is take your headphones, do this with them.
Yeah.
Suddenly they will sound different, right?
Yeah.
And that's true of every headphone that exists on earth. That's true even of the RAL or whatever. Um, that means that the actual experience, and it's because headphones rely on proximity to your ear and coupling with the ear to produce the sound that we expect. And that means that ultimately your experience is going to vary somewhat depending by how much it actually leaks and how much it actually leaked on the coupler that it was on, right?
Yeah. I I am still curious about. So, given your sort of take here about the question of accuracy,
That
um,
is that there is no such thing.
yeah, why do we care so much about um, DF HRTF? And
Okay,
I already know the answer, but I wonder if you could talk about that.
and I do want to say DF is a really well theoretically supported position. It's one that you can find some pretty good empirical support for, but there's a scenario where someone did a very large controlled listening test and some other synthesis of human head related transfer functions is found to be better, right? It would surprise me, but DF is not like holy writ. It's just the best that we have
Sure,
evidence for, in my opinion.
sure.
So to answer that, we have to start with what is a diffuse field, right? And a diffuse field is just a nerd term for the sound is coming from everywhere or nowhere.
Hmm.
So if you were in a room which was massively echoic and you had a sound source massively far away from you so that there was almost no direct sound, it was all reflections coming from all which ways, that's a diffuse field. Or if you were surrounded in a dome made out of
Yeah,
speakers that
yeah.
were all firing at once.
Hmm.
And in fact, Sennheiser synthesized a diffuse field somewhat effectively in a way like that. But the reason that we tend to go with that as this is what makes sense for headphones is because while sound from a speaker or from, my fingers snapping is from a localizable point in space, and so it's going to be attributed to timbral characteristics of sound incident from that point in space. That's not true of headphones.
Hmm.
Headphone sounds move with our heads, and they generally lack any of the binaural cues that our brains use to say, that's coming from right over there. That's coming from right over there. Because of that, Gunther Thiel, a German nerd, made a fairly long winded, but in my opinion, very compelling pitch for that means that humans will perceive them subjectively as directionless / coming from nowhere /
Yeah.
coming from inside your head. And indeed, generally speaking, headphones sound, particularly if you compare them to a speaker or to a real sound, like the sound is coming from between your ears.
Hmm. So
In that case, his logic was since we use, say, the in front of us HRTF, the frontal HRTF for the timbre of things from in front, we should use the comes from nowhere HRTF for the timbre of things from inside of our head.
so here's, I think you get why I'm attaching the interesting bit about this to accuracy, or vice versa. The interesting bit about accuracy to DFHRTF, and it will be on two fronts. One is, given what you've just said in that respect, when something it deviates significantly from a, like, let's say, not, we're not talking specifically about like bass or tilt, but rather the
The
DFA.
shape of the
Yeah,
response.
exactly. Yeah. Uh, why do we care, for starters? And then the second is, so attaching that to basically the repudiation of the concept of accuracy. And then the second would be, um, what is uniquely good about matching the expectation of sounds being in our heads? So, for example, I'm thinking of like, there was a headphone that I reviewed not that long ago, the D9200 from Denon, and it sounded like what they were trying to do there was deliberately affect the FR to the point where it didn't really resemble an HRTF really at all. However, it sounded like they were deliberately trying to make it sound more open and spacious, and have sound be affected, but with this very spacious quality. Um, I want to get your sort of sense on that, like, because is it that those two things are kind of squared? At the same time, we still, when we think of something as good, we think of, well, this is pretty good, right? Because it is reasonably, it looks reasonably close to what a response, quote unquote, should look like.
Well, and I do want to note that that should is, I know you put the quote on there, but it bears softening that a little bit
Yeah.
more yet. We know that there's a pretty meaningful variation in what people prefer. And while that variation is somewhat quantified now, it's honestly one that I would love to see more detailed analysis of because
Mm-hmm.
there is, there people prefer different things.
Sure. Yeah.
um, for why we care about how it deviates from DFHRTF. So this is one where it's actually kind of funny. I disagree with I disagree with Teal, and I agree with Olive on this one,
Mm-hmm.
in spite of the fact that usually I side with Teal when they disagree. Um, Teal had this concept of, oh, well, in the future, all music will be binaural. Yeah, that one didn't pan out.
Well,
Um,
maybe we're just still waiting on that,
yeah, it's like
as headphones
nuclear
become
cold
more
fusion.
ubiquitous. Yeah.
Yeah. But so he said, okay, well, you can actually define accuracy there by saying if it literally sounds like being there, which is possible with binaural, then it's accurate. And then for other purposes, it should be DFH or TF equalized because that will make it sound least timbrely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And his whole thesis there is based on the color of the sound that we hear is based on the difference between the response at our eardrum and the expected HRTF that we're sort of
Right.
applying to it.
So it's for the benefit specifically of not sounding timbrely wrong, even if that means it all comes from inside of our head.
Well, and the thing is, you can't really get away from it sounding inside of your head. Like you can change the size of a head stage for headphones, but
Yeah, I get what you're
without
saying. Yeah.
using spatial audio, I have never had an object in the sound image be consistently outside of my head at a distinct place.
Right.
You
Yeah.
you get moments, and this I think misleads people because you get moments where there's something that's like, is that somewhere in my room? But then you turn your head, and as you turn your head and the sound moves with you, almost always that illusion
Yeah.
disappears.
Yeah.
It's also why it almost only happens for transient sounds, like you hear a knock or a single,
Somebody
a
knocking on the
single.
door or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I got you.
So this all is to say though is that the perceived response is, under Thiel's model, simply the difference between the listener's diffuse field HRTF and the response of the headphone on the listener's ear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which isn't really that controversial, given that that would basically be the same thing as saying that the difference between the headphones, perceived quality and the well, the headphone's perceived quality is simply based on the Harman target difference to the headphone on, the fixture.
Well,
Like there's the basic concept here is that brains expect HRTF shaped things to be there. The question mostly being how exactly shaped, although in general, the great success of Harman shows that even if you define a target with a very, very small number of points, you can get something that people generally like, right? Like people are probably picky, but people are not so picky that they will not enjoy something that is a little bit wrong there.
Ribbon Freestyle says science. I agree. So would it be correct in your view to say that the reason we do care about, you know, DFHRTF response is timbre, or something along the lines of timbre, because that trying to get closer to what the brain expects to hear. I see you are deep in thought on the chat.
No, sorry, that's not the chat. No. MRS comments that Apple's spatial audio does a pretty good job with creating the illusion of spatiality. That is absolutely a binaural hearing model though. Like that's why it works.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah. I remember when I was testing out some of that stuff, and I was testing it out with, I can't remember if it was like Apple TV or whatever, some sort of content delivery thing. And I went, oh, that's cool.
DSP is really going to change a lot of audio and a lot for the better going forward. I'm really happy with where computer audio is going.
Yeah, same.
So that said, sorry, can you remind me of what you were saying?
Oh, I was saying, the reason why we do care about, DFHRTF then, or that, something, something reasonably looks like that is because of, well, we could describe it in terms of timbre, but we could also describe it in terms of, something that the brain is going to expect things to sound like.
I mean, it's about perceived frequency response, right?
Yeah. So that's not to then decouple. I mean, I do still think of that. So so that statement on its own, as being uniquely attached to the shape of basically the shape of the ear gain, and tilt being a uniquely I like more bass, I like less bass kind of thing, right? Or I like it warmer, I like it brighter kind of thing. And I think for me that's really where I'm kind of okay with a distinction between accuracy and preference, because I feel that you can get one of them right and the other one wrong, if that makes sense. For a given person,
you can have something that is, well, okay, hold on. Does that mean you think something could be perceived to be accurate but non-preferred, or that something could be preferred but not perceived to be accurate?
The latter.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I don't think that. Well, because I mean, it's the same thing as like oversaturated TVs, right? Like sometimes it's a nice effect, even if it's clearly not realistic.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, no, I think that's a very cold take.
Now, but this gets into things that are a little bit more grounded to actually reading graphs and looking at graphs. It is still very difficult to be able to tell. Say for example, you prefer the FR equivalent of a slightly more vibrant TV, right? That exaggerates something. It's very difficult to tell by looking at a graph, for something that does deviate, whether that's going to be something that you like.
Yeah, whether it is a euphonic distortion.
Yeah, exactly. Or
dysphonic.
Well, you certainly can't do it for everybody, right? And that's why I don't think we try. we often don't try. I can give my sort of, sense of it or description of like, well, this one kind of worked out for me, right? Maybe somebody else isn't going to like it that way. What do you think about the idea of, I always come back to this idea that at the very least we could do certain, we could create certain rules. Like, for example, generally when in the treble, when lower harmonics are overemphasized over, the upper ones, that can sound unpleasant. Now, so, I'm only ever listening up my own 2 ears, so I don't know if that's true for everybody. But
yeah,
when something sounds glaring, or there's like a very strong emphasis to like I don't know, uh, yeah, like 6K for example, and it's super dark, for the rest of the treble, you tend to notice that more. Whereas if the rest of the treble is elevated above 6K, you don't notice it as much, for example.
So I think so let's address the uncontroversial portion first, right? Like there are things where we can objectively say, quantifiably established in the lit, a peak is more subjectively noticeable in response
Sure,
than a dip, right?
sure.
So we know that there are some deviations that are more audible than others, and that there are some deviations that people find more annoying than others. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything that we conjecture like that
For sure.
is
Yeah.
correct, though.
Yeah.
For example, I don't really have the same thing with mid treble peaks that
Well,
you do.
HD 600 or 800, sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay. So, I mean, it could be that, but it could also be, I mean, I was going to say it could also be HRTF. Uh, but there are also situations where you can see like a series of peaks and it may look bad, but it perceptually isn't really that bad. It may have an effect on timbre, it may have an effect on something else, but it's difficult for me to say in all cases these peaks are bad because I don't know if that's going to be true or not unless I hear it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are a bit overly hasty to prognosticate based on graphs. Like,
Yeah.
and well, there's graphs where you know it's going to be shit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But the smaller, either in width or in magnitude, that the deviations become, the exponentially harder it is to figure out how it's going to affect your experience, particularly from a is this going to be positive or negative from my point of view.
Yeah.
Like there's things that I expected to find quite tolerable that I really didn't like, and I am going to invoke the Utopia again.
I want you to listen to a
I
more
did.
recent one. Oh, when
I
was that?
did. Last time I was in the office with Andrew Lissamore. Actually, we
Was
both
it
listened to
his?
his pair. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
I listened to
Yeah,
his
I
pair,
don't hear that one
and
as having any significant treble peaks. It's crazy.
if you don't hear
Nothing.
that one as peaky, we are having a completely different
Yeah,
experience
that's. That one also doesn't measure peaky. So,
on that head.
yeah. Well, actually, I should measure it on the 512. I haven't done that yet.
You should measure it on the
Yeah,
5128.
I've done it on. I did it on the Gross. It doesn't
I
measure
mean,
peaky.
this
So
is the whole reason we have multiple ears now, Andrew. What are you
this is
doing?
yeah. Well, there's a whole bunch of headphones that I would like to measure that are currently in use, and it requires ripping them from people's cold dead hands.
I mean,
Um,
you gotta do. Well, you say that, but it's funny contrasting you versus Taryn. Whenever Taryn talks about you, it's just like, oh yeah, Andrew Park came by and hoovered up everything in the entire building.
yes.
He was like, I tried to get something from Taryn for the seventh time this week.
Yes, exactly. That is how that relationship works. And then the flip side is that I get forced to measure things that I don't want to have. Like, I get forced to spend time with Grados, for example. I'm just like, God damn it.
I mean, Grado's at least.
No,
What can
they
I
don't
say
at
now?
least anything. There is no redeeming quality.
Okay, no, there is a redeeming quality of Grados.
Mods.
No, definitely not. No,
Okay.
the
What
redeeming
else?
quality is that they show us how bad other things could be.
Okay, yes, that's fair.
They're the low anchor. It's like the Audio Quest Night Owl or the Nighthawk.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's another low anchor. I mean, I can tell you perceptually what's a low anchor.
Yeah.
Expanse.
I think that's going a bit far. Like the Expanse to me, the timbral issue, and this
You're
isn't
right.
to say
It's not
that
a low
your
anchor. You're right. It
this
is
isn't
not.
to say that your experience. I mean, like I can't project for you because again, our whole conjecture here, right, is Expanse literally has a different perceived FR for
Yeah.
me, for you,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
someone whose HRTF matches the hats.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
there's a very viable scenario where for me it's a bit dry.
You
For
also heard it
you,
as harsh and peaky though as well, right?
yeah.
For
Well,
so
what I heard it as is pretty close to how it measured, but with less bass, since I have glasses,
yeah.
and with suck out in like the 1K to 2K area and a
Hmm.
pretty meaningful upper mid peak.
So Now, I also hear it as having that upper mid or lower treble peak or whatever, however we want to call that region. But I also, when I listen to it on the Zale HM1 with the, you know how it has the shelf functions, like the,
Mm-hmm.
and I turned the shelf function up for treble, it went away. Like
Wait, what?
it like, well, I shouldn't say it went away because it didn't go away. It's that perceptually it was no longer glaring in that region. And I just think
Fascinating.
of that as being like, well, the treble's just masking it, you know, like it's like
So,
it's
what does the Zales shelf look like from an FR
I'm
standpoint? Is that something where it just basically turned it into an HE6?
I mean, not exactly, um, but it significantly brought the treble up to compensate for, well, yeah, perceptually at least, it brought it much closer to in line to how something would sound normal to me, right? If that makes sense. Um, so for me, it was specifically that region was elevated over the rest of the treble that made it sound glaring. And I find that also to kind of be the case sometimes with. I have this debate with Metal 571 all the time, where, in my view, if you have a reasonably balanced range between upper mids and treble, if that's reasonably well balanced, you can have quite high ear gain, and it's not fatiguing. Or like he likes everything to be less ear gain, right? For example,
Yeah, I was gonna say. Well,
so compared to the way he likes things to sound, I could say you can actually have more ear gain there, so long as it's reasonably balanced for that region with the rest of the treble.
so we've got someone who's like me in chat. Aria says the Utopia sounded very bright to me. The Utopia sounded very peaky in the treble to me, which I
Yeah.
think generally is how people identify brightness.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I
they do.
agree
Yeah.
completely.
But again, for me and for what I measured, nothing. So I hear it closer to the way that it measures, which is interesting.
And well, and the thing is, this isn't to say that anyone's wrong, right?
Yeah.
Which sounds all terribly relativist, but I mean, obviously, some people could be
Well,
describing things
so
wrong, but
actually,
there's also a reasonable chance that they
in
are
this
actually right.
case, I do think it is headphone transfer function related because the way that those spring-loaded cups, like these ones, so this is a Lear, right? With the Utopia pads, this sort of spring loading function means that the contour of this part of your head is going to cause it to be at a different angle for every single person. So that could absolutely be a factor.
Yeah, and this one is always, and people are asking, by the way, people who came in late are asking, what are we defining as accuracy? The whole purpose of this video has been, at least for me, a polemical against the idea of accuracy as really meaning anything consistent or distinct when people say it. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. I think not in all cases, but I think by and large that's the
yeah.
conclusion.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, it's one of those things where there are some people who, when they say accuracy, they mean I want my speaker setup to sound exactly like, Abbey Road or whatever. But that's a pretty narrow segment.
That's all they're ever listening to.
Yeah, well, and that's the problem, right? Like
Yeah.
different mastering studios have different speakers.
Yeah.
And even if you have like there's a way to get there, right? If you
Yeah.
want to experience the sound as it would be at a bunch of different, mastering and mixing studios, technically you can get like a Smith Realizer or a the other one, the MIT one. Wow, I should remember their name. Anyway, they're both, you put microphones in your ears and take measurements in a room. And in those, you could simulate a bunch of different studios, and I guess you could even come up with master quality authenticated formats
I mean,
that
this is
synced up those things.
kind of what Odyssey was trying to do with their what was it called? Reveal Plus, where you could select different environments.
Yeah, and I'm sure like that was probably using impulse responses, right?
I'm not sure what they were doing. I just thought that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah, and I mean you could definitely do something like that, right? And you can do it with differing degrees of accuracy. But the question is how many of us are really saying, I desperately want to be inside this specific studio?
Right. No,
Like,
no,
and
no.
if that is you, then congratulations, you are one of the few.
Yeah.
You want accuracy.
Yeah.
But for most people, for me, for probably most of you, What you probably want is, I want to have the best experience of music possible,
Well,
right?
but we see it. I see it even in the most recent video that I did on the HD 600, where I described it as having a deficiency in the bass,
Yeah.
and I would get comments of people saying, "Well, it's not deficient. It's just accurate in the bass, and you want a bass boost." Like, and it's and it. So a lot of the time, those statements are couched in kind of purchase justification or ownership, fandom, all that kind of stuff. Uh,
Well, and lest we forget, also marketing very
Marketing,
heavily. I
Bayer
mean, like
Dynamic headphones, absolutely. That's you see. You can't say a negative thing about Bayer Dynamic headphones without somebody coming in and saying, "But it's for studios."
well, and like let's throw a bomb in another direction. There's a lot of that dialogue around things like digital converters and clocks and stuff. Oh, I don't want the timing and accuracy impacting the accuracy of my music. So it's
Yeah, I
a
haven't
lot
seen
of
that,
money
but
is
yeah.
made off of. Oh, you haven't hung out with enough of Cameron's friends.
Hey, I've been to some of those crazy shows where I wanted to do a video about this at some point, where it's like there's like the kind of situations that I think maybe most of the audience here finds themselves in when they're listening to their headphones. They're sat at their desk, they're enjoying their day, they're working, whatever, and they're listening to a pair of headphones. And then there's like a completely different side of the audiophile world where things go deep into madness. Like they go like into full science experiment, art experiment mode. And yeah, it'd be fun to do a showcase video on that because it is unbelievably esoteric and crazy.
I mean, esoterica is kind of what all hobbies degenerate into, though.
Yeah.
It's like those people who have model train sets that take up
Yeah.
entire houses.
But I mean, just like what we were talking about with like vinyl at the beginning about how vinyl, like if you're into vinyl, it's probably because of the ritual, right? Like there's that whole other element to it. I feel like there's
Well,
probably something
that
there
is a
too.
very common content. I would say that there are probably some vinyl people who would not be pleased with that characterization.
Oh, who
Like,
are there for the sound specifically?
well, yeah, I mean, I think that,
They're not interested in the artwork. They're just
well,
like, pop it on, off we go.
I think that there is a population of people who do think that vinyl sounds better irrespective of ritual and like the circumstance of it. And I like you can look for technical justifications for that, and some people have. Or you can say, well, this is something that does objectively sound audibly different.
And then
And
people like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and they may like it just because it's identifiably different, and they say, well, I know I'm listening to vinyl,
Well,
so
how do
I'm
you
happier.
separate that preference, but from the ritual aspect? Like, how can anybody be so sure that it's
Well,
they don't care? I mean, even if
so
they
the differentiator I would have is people will, and this really befuddled me. People will rip vinyl.
oh, but I mean that's
I was also
I
very
am aware.
surprised.
I remember that from like the what.cd era.
Yeah,
And you'd get like 24-bit vinyl rips. I do remember
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So there is a group of people who aren't about the experience of vinyl, who don't need to own it, but who do, you know, and this probably is the placebo effect, right? I'm not saying that they're right, but they aren't just in it for the ritual or for the physicality. It's just that they actually really think that vinyl will sound better.
I remember a friend of mine in grad school. He was actually one of the smartest guys in that, you know, who was in the same program as me. He was super into vinyl, and one of the professors, he was talking about it before class, and one of the professors asked him like, "Hey, is it actually any better?" And he'd be like, "Oh yeah, you definitely notice the difference. It really matters." And this was like before I was deep into the audio well, but I remember even at the time sort of having that lasting impression of like, well, this guy's definitely into it for the ritual though. Like, there's no way he isn't. And it's not even like just the ritual. It's like he enjoyed being seen that way as that kind of audiophile. So it was about like the culture behind it, the subculture aspect of it.
I also in college, I think you meet this kind of person a lot in college. I viscerally remember being over to a classmate's house, and he had a giant pair of absolute shitbox speakers, like white van special, but from the
Yeah.
80s, and his turntable directly on top of one of them. And he was exceptionally proud of his collection of vinyl and how much better it sounded
Yeah.
on these speakers, which really were some of the worst speakers I have ever heard.
Yeah. Which
Um,
to me, it brings it all back to confidence, and people find it in all kinds of different places. It's that gave that person confidence. Like the idea of well, vinyl or whatever esoterica. It gave them confidence. Similarly, a certain price tag can give people confidence, and similarly, the question of accuracy. Whether it's for marketing reasons or whatever else, target adherence, etc., is another kind of confidence.
I really want to make, and someday I'm going to do this. So beware, everyone who watches this. I will do this someday. I'm going to make a company, and it's going to be like behind a shell, so you don't know it's me. And I'm going to sell products on the basis that they have superior performance in some new parameter that I've completely invented. It's going to be called like Quimble or something.
It's
And I'm going to see how much I can sell on the basis of no one else's speakers are as quimbly as ours.
Yeah, this is going to be headphones.evil, where you do all the things that people accuse us of doing.
I don't think anyone has accused us of that yet. They
I
will
mean,
soon.
it's not far. It's not far. Okay, we've been going for over an hour, so let's get
Yep.
into spicy hour.
Spicy.
So
There is one question I do want to field
okay, yeah.
first, and it's not a spicy question, so it doesn't meet the definition of spicy hour.
Okay, but throw all your pepper questions in now.
Yes.
Let's go.
Get them percolating.
Yeah.
So Novocaine says, "How do you guys think DSP and ear scanning will affect our definition of accuracy?" I think that's a really good question.
Ear scanning, like with there's I'm trying to think of the products that let you do that, because I have tried one
Apple
before.
has one.
Yeah, but I tried one from Anchor and it was terrible. The Soundcore thing.
Oh, probably.
It didn't work at all.
Genelec has one, and it's quite good, I believe.
Okay.
But so ear scanning and all of those things are for synthesizing, like a binaural sound field, right? Like you're getting that so you can make a model of the ear, so that you can do a physics model and say, okay, well, if a sound wave is propagating from this direction across here, how does it, what's the time delay between the sides? What's the frequency response changes? They're not usually perfectly accurate, but they're getting better all the time. Now, funnily, that could move us to an area where accuracy becomes like a really consistent thing, in the same way that VR could move us to a situation where accuracy becomes a thing in other media. Because you really could get to a point where a creator of this content can say, this is precisely how this is supposed to sound, or even could just record content in a specific way, and you can experience it as though you were literally there. And that really blows a lot of the lid off this whole argument.
Mm-hmm.
But all the existing music, all the existing content, everything that's ever existed up till now will keep on existing. And it will still have just the same problems, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So if you make things with an intention of being reproduced in a certain way and you make them right, you can record and play back in a way that is, accurate, that where you're saying, this is the experience of being there, right?
Right.
But that's not going to change that, any of the Beatles stuff is multi-track that was not recorded spatially. It's not going to change that any of the music that I listened to that was recorded in 2023 was, is still done that way. So,
what music do you listen to?
bad music mostly.
But you still like it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who doesn't like Flash?
And so it is with headphones.
Yeah. Listen,
Well, actually,
the HD800 is the official headphone of Flourish Fonts.
Did they like
No,
make
but
their
at least
music
two. No, but at least two people I know. Well, I know Constantine uses the HD800S and he likes it too, so I think that counts. I think we're converging on it.
I know that Periphery uses it in there, because they're like one of the more modern artists that they have like a home studio, or like the guy, the front man of the band, he has like a home studio kind of setup, and so they do a lot of their recording there. And I remember watching one of their videos and be like, hey, that's a HD800.
Jamie's in chat just being happy we're talking about VR finally.
Okay. Let's get into the spicy hour stuff. I did manage to finally remove the super chats. It it it,
Oh,
it
all right.
finally took.
Everyone test that. Send a super chat right now to
You
test
can.
if he
The
actually
function
removed it.
is the feature is removed, thankfully. Um, yeah. If there's ever a reason to bring that back, we would, but it doesn't make sense for this format. Um, Somebody is asking for a headphone reviewer tier list, and I don't think
That's
I'm gonna
pretty
do.
spicy.
I don't think I'm gonna do that. However, one thing I will say, uh, maybe I don't know, maybe if I like write a tell-all or something like years later once I'm retired or whatever.
Can I do a headphone reviewer tier list?
Sure. Well, hold on. I was gonna say before that. I mean, you're not a headphone reviewer, so go ahead. I don't care. um, or unless you want to be one, and then you could just put yourself at the top, right?
I would definitely not put myself at the top.
I will say my favorite speaker reviewer is Aaron from Aaron's Audio Corner.
Oh yeah, everyone loves Aaron.
Love Aaron. Yeah.
Corner.
Um,
Formerly of Medley's Musings.
yeah.
Really
So
lovely guy.
the other thing I was going to say is this is not a career path that I would necessarily advise for people.
I'll go further. Don't do it. It's a bad plan.
Yeah. Just because of there are things that you end up having to deal with where you go, Jesus Christ. Like, it is some of the most, I don't know, disheartening. I don't know. Basically, a lot of people have really strong opinions about this stuff. And
Turning your job into a hobby is always a mistake.
Yeah.
And turning a job that is heavily based around an internet community into your hobby.
Oh God.
Based around,
Yeah.
your job is just like, you may as well just shoot yourself.
I have to imagine though that there are subcultures out there that are a little bit more, positive.
Okay, on the internet.
Yeah.
What's an internet community hobby? Pat probably says this isn't even a hobby I would recommend people get into.
Actually, it is for me. I would recommend people get into it, but I recommend getting into it briefly. Like get like to the point where you're like, I love the way that this sounds and this gives me good experiences, and then just like.
Hey, but we're so close to just commercial off the shelf true wireless being that already. Like, I think that by the time anyone who I tell to become an audiophile is in it, that commercial stuff is going to be good enough.
I don't know. I've only heard one commercial true wireless that I think is actually good, and it's the AirPods Pro 2.
AirPods Pro 2 is pretty good.
Yeah. So maybe I don't know. My threshold is a little different.
Well, I mean, it's good enough though, right? Like, that's the difference.
Well,
like,
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's good enough, but that's not the point about the subculture. You're not looking for good enough. You're looking for perfection or amazingness or something special.
What's a common audiophile rec that's better than the QC Buds 2? Because I just listened to those yesterday again. Because I was like
the
doing
Bose
some
ones?
gardening. Yeah.
A common audiophile IEM that's better?
Or just our headphone.
Or headphone that's better. So, full disclosure, I have not heard those, so I can't weigh in on that one.
Sorry. Have you heard the original?
No.
It
may have. I did a.
Like, you will find them shouty. I will tell you that right now.
Yeah,
you will
so I was
find
there
them
when
shouty.
Sam was doing it, and Sam was measuring it on our setup. I believe he was doing it. He did a bunch there, and that was one of them. I think he ended up actually buying it. He chose that over the AirPods Pro 2. But I remember looking at the FR going like, no, that's shouty. So yeah, judge before listening, which is not something you should do. But with the AirPods Pro 2, I knew that I liked them, so maybe that's a better one to consider. And I can absolutely think of lots of common IEMs that I would choose over the wired IEMs that I would choose over the AirPods Pro 2.
Okay, so let's set aside IEMs for a second, though, because normal people don't buy wired IEMs. Normal people don't have headphone jacks anymore.
I mean, it might be changing, to be honest. Because it's no longer cool to be seen wearing AirPods Pro 2s.
Well, yeah, I mean, you say that. AirPods also outsold the entirety of hi-fi.
Yes, I know.
Year.
I'm commenting on my commentary is based on a few headlines about Gen Zers or whatever.
I mean, no one cares what Zoomers think. They don't have money yet.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Get back to me in 5 years with Zoomer opinions. Then they're going to be worth money.
They're all wearing AirPods Pro 2s in 5 years.
No, they're all going to be wearing AirPods Pro 4 VR editions in 5 years,
Yeah, yeah,
and along with probably most of the planet.
yeah, no, for sure. So where I do agree though is that is with DSP. I think that that's because there's so much that you can do with DSP that you can't. The closest commercial application headphone would that is doing this in my view would be the Odyssey Maxwell. It's not like commercial in the sense that it's like commonly available at
Commercial.
but
A
it's
commercial $700 gaming headset.
it's $300.
Oh, right.
It's $300
Oh, fuck. I
and
was mixing it up with the Batiste somehow.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
I mean
that's
that is intended to be a little bit more mainstream as well, but it is
but
high
I know
supposed to
that's.
be, yeah,
Listen, I'm old. My brain gets rusty.
yeah.
All these newfangled Bluetooth headphones
I
kind of
mean,
blur
you're younger
together.
than me.
Not Ed Hart, Andrew, and you know that.
Ah, we could have a old soul off.
I was old as a baby. I will win.
Yeah, old man economist runs deep. Okay,
Mhm.
let's get to the next spicy.
Yeah, there's a severe dearth of that other than the question about the tier rankings.
Yeah, and I haven't seen any peppers yet, so come on,
We've
guys.
we've drained the well of spice. We may have to do a cold take thing where we just roast people for thinking that they have a cold take.
That they have a spicy take, or
Well,
or no?
so
Do you
like
get everybody's normal takes and we tell them that they're terrible?
exactly.
Oh my god.
I mean, listen, I'm doing my best here to mine content out of chat, and chat's not doing much for me here.
All right, let's see.
Daniel, well, we have one bad take. Daniel Christosek says Gen Y will come after Gen Z. I'm Gen Y. He's Gen Y too.
I'm a millennial.
Yeah, that's Gen Y.
Is it? Okay. Oh
Okay,
yeah, I
so
guess that makes sense. Yeah.
it's Gen X,
Yeah.
Millennial, Gen Z. Guess what comes between X and Z?
Yeah. All right, let's see.
Wait, Joshua Valor was a SEAL trainer?
Wait, for like the animal?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wait, why have I heard about this? Is this like a long-standing troll?
I can imagine him being a SEAL trainer.
Yeah, I could too. Um. Okay, I have a question for you. What
Yeah.
is the weirdest job you've ever had?
Me?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely all of like, oh God, the only stuff that I've done outside of audio has been normal shit though. Like I loaded fucking shipping containers. I picked apples. Like I did
You didn't
normal
do any
shit.
like that one job where you're like, this is really weird.
No, I mean, I taught martial arts for a little bit, but that wasn't paid, so it wasn't a job.
I'd say that counts.
Eh.
That's up there.
I mean, that's not that weird.
It's not that weird, no. The weirdest job I ever did, apart from being a headphone reviewer, because that's definitely the weirdest.
Yeah, for sure.
Is one of my first jobs. It was a summer job where I delivered drugs to old people. So I worked for the pharmacy.
Okay, your phrasing on this is not great.
No, I know. So I worked for the pharmacy, and my job was to basically go to the pharmacy. I did their cash runs to the bank, and then I also would fill my car up with all the prescription drugs for the old people who couldn't go into the pharmacy to pick them up. I lived in a small town, so then I would just drive around town, being the drug fairy. And that on its own wasn't that weird, but there were multiple occasions where I'd knock on the door, they say come in, and they're just completely naked, or they're just like they're sitting in the bathroom with the door open. All right, here's your drugs. Off I go. So that is definitely the weirdest job I've ever had.
Yeah, that's pretty weird. I mean, it's pretty weird that like they were just like, yeah, no, we'll give you 17 people's prescriptions.
Yeah.
That sounds
Also,
normal.
and I was like a 17-year-old at the time. Like I was. It seems like something that I probably shouldn't have done. I shouldn't have been the person responsible for that.
I mean, well, what are you gonna do? Get hopped up on blood pressure meds?
I don't know.
I mean, like, I could see not giving you like drugs that have a street value, but most
Oh, I'm
drugs are
sure there
not
was
much
stuff
fun.
like Dexedrine or whatever else in there. I don't know.
What the heck is
Oh, sorry, it's
Dexedrine?
like Adderall. I don't know.
Oh, who gives an old person Adderall?
I don't know.
Damn, I want to be old in your hometown. Just
No,
be
you
like,
don't.
hey,
You
I
really
need
don't. It
some
was
speed. I've got a
no.
case of old.
It was really sad, to be honest. Like a lot of it was really depressing. Um, so yeah, no, I don't recommend that.
And sh-
All right, I see one pepper. The
Yeah.
removal of the headphone jack from most phones was only good for the community because it forced more interest in hi-fi dongles. So specifically, like the Apple dongle and stuff like that.
Can I agree with half of a take? Like,
Which
I think it was good that they removed it, but I don't think that dongles are good. I think dongles are
well,
bad.
well, but hold on. There are dongles that really do suck compared to the Apple dongle, right?
Yeah.
Like there are all kinds. I've used them in the past. They're terrible. So if I don't know if I would say that that's necessarily the catalyst for the Apple dongle being better, than it otherwise could have been.
Well, and for
But
all the new things, the Meizus or whatever the heck.
yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe for those, but I mean that's not nearly as commonly found as the Apple dongle. So I mean, in a sense, it is allowing people who still use wired headphones, to have better sound than they otherwise may have.
I
If they
mean,
if they were buying some other shitty one, right?
I,
Like if
I
that never
mean,
changed.
okay, yes. It's good that the Apple dongle exists. It's good that other good dongles exist. I don't think that that's why it's good that the jack was removed, though. I think that it's good that it was removed because it basically forced people towards headphones that had DSP.
I agree. I'm just still not. I haven't yet found, other than the AirPods Pro 2, I haven't yet found any to be actually good. I'm just gonna say that there are some that are okay. Like I would say the Sony WF-1000 HM5 or whatever the current
I
gen
tried
is.
one of the
Four,
WF-1000s.
four.
It was very mid.
It's not great. It's just it's okay. I would say. The There was one other one that I thought was okay, and it was the Samsung Galaxy Buds 2 Pro. I thought that was okay. So someone says Andrew's first adult encounters. the old people I'm delivering drugs to. Jesus Christ.
Jamie says many of us talk about wanting good audio to be more mainstream, but for a lot of us, we like the fact that it's a small niche.
I think so. I think there's a pretty strong element of like, I've bothered to do the research, and so therefore I know better and I am better. It's like that superiority complex to a certain extent.
I want mainstream audio to be gooder. I don't want high-end audio to be more mainstream. You know? Like I don't want to inflict this
I don't know. I
weird
kind
space
of
on too many people.
So there is a sort of self-defeating aspect to the latter in this, if Jamie's take is true here. If high-end audio becomes more mainstream, then that it becomes less niche, and those people who are interested in it because it's niche would be less interested in it, or they would go to the deeper the more niche ends of that.
Well, I mean, we already did that. It's called measurements.
I don't know. I think measurements are becoming more mainstream than.
Well, yeah, and that's why people keep trying to invent new measurements.
I
Once a measurement gets popular, people are like, "No, I've invented a new way of measuring things using
I
something
mean,
that's
this might be
totally
historically true.
coherent."
I don't know if it's true now though. Like I think
Index.
I mean that's not a measurement though.
Index is a measurement.
I mean it's an index score.
It's a set of measurements.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I mean that's also, that on its own is not that commonly used.
Well, I think it will be specifically because people want the new hotness. You know, they
Well,
want
they
to
want
be
something
niche.
that
They
maybe
want to be
better
edgy.
explains. Yeah, they want something that maybe better explains their experience than just what
MDAX
they
has
see.
more sex appeal, is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But if they better understood what a frequency response graph means, or like, I'm not saying they need to learn how to read FRs better, alone, but like understand the rest of the context around it and what. I mean, I always go back to this is truth in a given condition, rather than truth about that product in all conditions, which is kind of how people tend to think about this stuff. I think they would have an easier time with. You can find those nuggets of truth that you're looking for in these other places in the existing measurements. So I suppose where I'm at with that.
Jeff Steve has a good one. Is
Okay.
there a headphone you've been wrong about one way or the other?
Oh, tons.
Yeah, he's been wrong about a lot of headphones, not me.
I mean, I think I think you're wrong about the one that you. I think you're still wrong about it.
No, I mean, well, it goes without saying when you review stuff, you're going to be wrong sometimes. But just like takes that I've had in the past, a lot of them haven't aged great.
Like what?
Oh God, can we do one of your bad takes first?
One of my bad takes. Okay,
Because I'm
so
gonna get eaten alive online.
yeah, so I think in the past I've been more inclined to do more EQ than is reasonable for people to do, and that would have led to more positive judgments about a headphone. So like,
It's a very softball one. What's something what's a take you have now that you cringe at? Or you had then that you cringe at now?
probably anything to do with amps and DACs.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right,
Okay,
so
now
I
yours.
got two.
Yeah.
One, this is the one that I'm personally more embarrassed about, but people aren't going to excoriate me for it in the same way. I had a 8BA, four-way custom in-ear monitor that for a long time I was like, this sounds fantastic. It's so good because they've
What was it?
broken up the frequencies by, to so that each driver has minimum intermodulation distortion or whatever. Sounded real not good.
What
Like
what what was it?
custom art harmony.
Okay.
And I think that's off the market now, so I think that that's like not damaging like the livelihood of Piotr, who is a very nice guy. But that headphone was definitely a product of a pre-measurement era.
Right.
Um, the take that everyone's gonna hate though is, and I still hold this to some degree, the DT990 is underrated. I had a DT990 for a while. It has meaningful timbral issues. But particularly if you're not just measuring it with fresh out of the box pads, it's not actually nearly as bad as people give it credit for.
That's fucking terrible. It's just like bottom of the garbage. It is. I'll give a little snippet of a preview for one of the upcoming videos on the mixing thing, where the 990 was one of the headphones that was used for the mixing thing, and Cameron kept accidentally slipping up and calling it the Grado. So it is of that ilk.
Okay, listen. It's not quite there.
It's not quite Grado level of bad.
Yeah, it's not. Listen, it's not a perfect headphone, to be sure.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But it's not quite that bad.
I don't know. There's a lot of headphones out there where I think to myself, like, this, I could see how someone would like this, but I'm not really into it. And I like those custom art ones. I see the Fib A5. Someone says they like that one. I could see how, I've heard that one. I could see how somebody would like that one. It wasn't for me. And similarly with some of the other releases that people kind of like the Divinity V16. I think from I think it was the audio. A lot of people like that one, and I just remember listening to it and going, this is definitely worse than the Monarch. This is definitely not any better. But I could still see why people would like it. It's things that are not terrible, but they're not really getting me right in the feels. For goodness. Here's one from Super. Gaming got worse when it got more mainstream. I mean, this is part of that bigger topic, which I think is also somewhat involved in people's rejection of Harmon, where they don't, where it's like
They want to be hipsters.
yeah, yeah, it's that's what it is. It's like what's good is what's popular isn't necessarily what's good, and that is definitely, there's truth to that in some respects. Like you can find examples where that's true, right? Like I would say, well, the current trends in music are just abysmal. Like it's really tragic what's happened to music in the last, however many years.
How many years? How many years, hipster boy?
So this is actually my spicy take.
Okay.
I think that music it's always gotten worse, like every decade, basically since the Beatles. But because
Okay.
the Beatles were popular, right?
Okay, so every decade since the 1960s,
it's gotten
music
worse.
has gotten worse.
Yeah, not like across the board. There's always, so like I even listen to modern music that I think is really good. Like there's new music that comes out that is amazing as well. So I don't want to say across the board, but the things that are generally popular, whatever is at the top of the charts has gotten consistently worse since the Beatles, and like Zeppelin and those days essentially. But I think that the era that made it the worst was the 90s. I think the 90s is basically what killed mainstream music. The 80s had some particularly horrible stuff too, but the 80s also had some real gems that, like that were mainstream, like Queen, I would say, to a certain extent. I mean, Pink Floyd was earlier than that, but there was a lot of good music that came out of the 80s, even though a lot of the mainstream stuff was really bad too. But it really took a nosedive in the 90s for me.
I would agree that there was some atrocious music in the 90s, and honestly, if your take was the 90s was the worst decade for music, I would be tempted to agree with it.
That's basically where, because I mean, okay.
Well, but the premise that it's been getting, like, I would consider the 90s to be a deviation from trend.
You think it's gotten better? It's gone.
I think that
it's
both
gone from
the
terrible
80s
to
and
mid.
the 2000s were better than the 60s and the 90s.
You think the 80s and the 2000s are better than the 60s and the 90s?
Yes.
For mainstream?
Yes.
I wouldn't loop 60s together with 90s.
Well, I would say probably that the 90s and the 60s kind of trade blows for the mainstream. There was a lot of really bad 60s music.
You're right. There was a lot of really bad 60s music. But
I mean, like Tiny Tim existed.
But this is the thing. You have like standout, kind of like iconic, kind of generation changing music that came from the 60s.
Well, you have that in the 90s too.
Yeah, but in the 90s it was bad, is what my point is.
Well, a lot of it from the 60s was also bad.
But a lot of it was good.
Well, some of it was good in the 90s too.
What?
Okay, so this is where my personal hatred of grunge is really getting.
No, someone says grunge as well in the
well, no, I mean, like, I detest grunge.
It's terrible. So, with all apologies to our friends from Seattle and Android.
I come from Washington. Yes. I was raised in the 90s in Washington.
And grunge
all I fucking heard on the radio was grunge.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know. Like, there was, I don't know how chart topping it was, I guess, but there was some pretty good. I mean, the 90s had, if you are inclined towards hip hop, the 90s, I think, had some of the best hip hop.
Sure. I don't disagree with that. But it was kind successful. It really did. I suppose that is the most successful thing from the 90s. I think that's a reasonable thing to say.
Did Happy Talk just say All Star by Smash Mouth?
So was this Andrew shouldn't be allowed to talk even about music.
For you. Well, no, I mean, neither of us should be allowed to talk about music because we have the taste of boomers. Yes. Well, no, actually, that's not quite true. I have the taste of a mutated boomer because I listen to like funk, but also big band, and you're just a classical boomer.
No, I like jazz. I like jazz more than
that's classical. Why you're a classical.
Oh, classical boomer. I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I also like metal and I like rock.
Yeah, I know that's what makes us boomers.
Yeah.
Thinking that metal and rock is diverse is what makes us boomers. Yes, funk is horrible music. I'm not saying funk is good.
Funk?
I have previously... No, not funk. Funk.
What is funk?
I don't want to explain funk to you right now. I really... Oh, God.
uh,
Anyway, I have owned the fact that my taste in music is terrible, and I don't want to have to.
I actually think see, I don't have that opinion about my taste in music.
I have that opinion about your taste in
Yes, I know.
music.
That's what I was going to say. I'm very well aware that many people dislike my taste in music.
Oh
Um,
God.
yeah.
But
Um,
no, audiophiles critiquing music is always going to, because audiophiles have the worst taste in music of anyone, right? Like,
although
so
you can't walk into like an audio event without many of the sort of standards and staples being there. You know. So
well, standards and staples being Hotel California.
well, that's sure, but you can add. This doesn't make any point. It's more that there is at least some common element there, where it's music with instruments.
As opposed to music without instruments.
Yes.
Are you listening to a lot of like craft work
You
lately?
you generally don't find dubstep, in those events. I
Oh,
mean, it's
well, I
also
mean,
partially because it's
that's
catered
just because
towards
they're
boomers.
old.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know how much I care about the way that my dubstep sounds. It's
Why?
I don't know. I don't have that much of a. I want my trumpets to sound like trumpets. I don't care how much my, you know, generated tones sound.
You really are older than me.
I am. That's a
Okay.
factual statement.
So we have one question that I just want to field super fast before it gets totally
Oh,
buried.
we've got some
Novocaine
spicy stuff
asked.
here now, so
So Novocaine asked, are things we traditionally consider unimportant or debunked for headphone measurements, like phase or impulse measurements, going to be important as DSP gets more popular? Not unless someone fucks up. So
can
those
you
could
elaborate
go
on that?
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those could go wrong when you're doing DSP stuff. You can cause problems there. But if those are done right, then they won't be a problem. You would basically have to make an unforced error for those to matter. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't measure them, and I think we should measure the phase response of headphones, and we should look at, for example, excess phase.
Yeah.
But it's not likely those are
I
going to be problems.
I think the danger there too, though, is that if you start measuring it and then representing it, a la SPAF, then people start to, derive meaning from it that isn't there.
Yeah,
In
no, I
cases where
think
it doesn't matter.
that's something where basically it's a diagnostic test of did they make a horrible mistake.
Yeah, exactly. It have to be. It's fine to measure it, but then the reporting of it or presenting of it needs to be done in a particular way.
Although ironically, we did attract some controversy specifically because people feel that we're reporting something in a way that is not sufficiently subdued recently.
What
The
specifically?
the 5128 measurements.
Yeah, but what specifically about those measurements? Are you?
Well, a lot of people. Well, there was a kerfuffle on ASR.
Oh God, no,
Um,
yeah, that.
but no, but I think it's a reasonable point, right? Of we're putting the 5128 front and center as opposed to the 711s. I think we should be giving them more
Yes,
equal airtime.
yes. This is why I wanted to have that dialogue with Amir.
Well, yeah,
Genuinely, I want. I mean, I think it's a reasonable thing to discuss.
Yeah, no, I think that's. Listen, sorry, I'm just trying to squeeze some lemonade out of these lemons.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's fair.
Okay, back to the spice.
Yeah, I just to touch on that topic though. I mean, like, to me, a lot of it was the process of trying to figure out what to do with the 5128. I mean, we've already made a change, so which is that I started with 8 dB and now I'm at 10 dB. So it's not like it's a major change, but
I think that we're in a very transitional point with how we're measuring headphones right now, and
well, plus we also have measurement rigs. There's the 4128 that we also have, or the DMS has.
well, that's
DMS,
a personal
yeah,
possession of Douglas
yeah.
Marks.
And then we also have a community that is also publishing measurements too, and I think the idea of like, it's all just this one, focus on this one. Well, I do think there is something to the fact that it is especially in the bass and for IEMs that it is more accurate at low and high frequencies. That is, it is worth looking at that stuff, right? and having it be front and center. But that doesn't mean that the other stuff isn't interesting or useful either. And especially with some of the stuff that we are, working on in the future that we can't talk about right now.
I mean, we can. We just choose not to
We
in
just
order
choose
to
not
make
to.
life worse for the people who watch us.
Yeah, but this is all stuff that it is meant to go in conjunction with multiple different with measurements on multiple different heads. Are you reading a particularly spicy take?
I'm trying to understand what Haywood asked. Haywood X, could you rewrite that to elaborate a little bit?
I see one from listener. I am
Yeah.
fans have been unless you were on a different one right now.
Oh no, he asked something contemporary, but the listener one is after like a bajillion hot takes, I think,
Okay.
including. Well, no, let's do listener. It's
Okay.
favoritism, right?
Yeah. Which is what we're all about here. um, IAM fans have been gaslit into accepting flawed products for years now until reviewers raise their standards for mid-range tonality and give worse reviews. Companies won't improve their products. Is that a spicy take? Gaslit for accepting flawed products. I think yes. Do you think that's still going on now is what I would ask. Because I think that is true.
Well, he's complaining about the mid specifically, so I think he has some particular bugbear there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a sense of what that might be. The fact that reviewer targets exist, for example.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
Let's shove words in listener's mouth. Yeah, I think that's what listener thinks.
Okay. Well, I think there's two separate things there because the one element of that is that there is a lot of reviews out there that aren't necessarily dishonest but are very positive and they have a positive valence and it is not helpful to the industry and to the community. And I don't think that those people are necessarily outright lying about things or misreporting their experiences. I just think that they're for whatever reason choosing to gloss over things that people should know about.
Well, I think the problem is just dynamic range. Ironically, it's a classic audiophile problem.
Dynamic range.
Yeah.
How is that related to? I'm talking specifically about like I saw recently an extremely glowing review of one of the worst headphones of all time, and I think to myself like how.
Okay,
how?
So there are shills, right?
But I don't think this person was shilling. My point is more that it was just like the publication was the idea of posting a critical review didn't make sense. Like why would you review something that you didn't like? That's what I'm kind of
I actually think, at least for some reviewers that I know, the reason I say dynamic range is I think a lot of reviewers hesitate to go to the extremes.
Mm-hmm.
But particularly to the negative extreme, and that leaves them with a very compressed range of
I see what you're saying.
Description.
I thought you meant like in terms of sound, like
no, I think literally reviewers are low dynamic range and thus lo-fi.
Yeah.
So unless you're a reviewer who say, this headphone is awful, like this is terrible.
Yeah.
I don't like this at all. If you like this, you're weird. And also, this is fantastic. I loved this. You're not really getting the full range of actual experience because we all have heard a headphone. It's like if someone says, "Oh, I love that headphone," you'd be like, "Did you come from space?"
But I mean, there is also like a certain business model to the way that a lot of, and we should talk about this more. But there is a certain business model that leads to these outcomes, where you have people where they're not intentionally shilling, but at the same time are you only see positive reviews. And Critical did a video kind of related to this, where it was like a bad score is an 8 out of 10, and I kind of agree. Like I think the flip side is that you also sometimes see a lot of clout chasing and like where just everything is terrible, and while I agree everything is terrible without EQ, I can empathize with people preferring to spend more time with things that they actually enjoy.
Yeah, but you don't need a ton of time. Like, I do want to actually attack this premise because I see there's a lot that you need a lot of time to identify if something is bad, right? Like,
no,
you put on a headphone that's bad. and I know you don't think that. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
we both have had headphones where immediately put it on like this is terrible.
yeah.
Um, but I do think there are people who think that, you have to give a headphone a fair shot. But for bad audio equipment, for a lot of it, you can come to a very
I,
strong and
s-
accurate impression very quickly.
I suppose my threshold for bad is a bit like wider, or like it's a bit
I am having tried to voice things with you. I am aware that you have a very specific set of rules for what constitutes intolerable.
like I think there's a lot of things that are particularly intolerable. But in that sense, it's like, well, if there is a reason for anybody to care about this, you know, it might not be outright broken or terrible or like horrifically flawed to the point where, okay, maybe, but where there's literally no segment that would ever find it, enjoyable. That's one thing. But then there's a lot of stuff that is mid and just isn't competitive with whatever the standouts are at a given price range. And I think to myself, well, why the fuck should anybody care? So, in that sense, I am absolutely going to say it like it is. But I mean more specifically, if you are propositioned with, hey, do you want to review this thing that you know is bad? Why would you waste your time? Other than if you're going to try and be like, hey, look, I'm, clout chasing.
Well, but I mean, reviewing, that's what I don't get. I mean, maybe it's just because I'm just a terrible person, but like, I would rather do a negative review, you know? Like, I'd rather come out and say, this
Well,
thing sucks.
I mean, it's just boring because so much stuff sucks. I get
Well,
fired up when I find stuff like the Odyssey Maxwell because I'm like, this thing, they did something super cool here. This is dope, and I want to tell you about it. That's so much more interesting to me than being like, well, the gold planar thing is meh. It's not great. Like that's
I
not
mean,
fun.
I think you need to get more fired up against things.
I mean, I can be more animated about my dislike of things
No, no, I think
that
you
are
just
mid.
need to cultivate hate.
Oh, I mean, that
I
is
think you need to use your hate, like the power of the dark side, and let that guide you.
but then I would end up with almost every review except for the few headphones that I've reviewed positively would be overwhelmingly this is terrible and nobody should buy it.
That's great.
Yes,
People
but
would love that.
I mean I know it would be popular, but at the same time I also have to recognize that I am not representative of every segment, and this is true.
I know this is true, but the thing is, nobody expects your opinions to be anything but your opinions.
I
I mean,
mean,
okay, no
the
one
stronger
can
those are delivered,
reasonably
the more
expect.
they get into like I get people who get mad at me for representing my opinion on the Empyrean, for example, as fact. And it's like, well, obviously this is just my opinion. I didn't like it.
I listen, there will always be people who are mad, but people who are mad are engaged. Try to make people mad. That's what
People who
I
are mad
do.
or what, sorry?
People who are mad are engaged.
I suppose. I suppose that's true.
Now you understand my paradigm of interacting with stream chat.
Yes. This is why you're here, is to cause chaos and make people mad.
I mean, listen, I I am trying to voice a reasonable take here for once in my life.
No, it is a take that I agree with like wholeheartedly, across the board for the sort of reviewer culture out there, right? Like I think we should in general be more willing to review, well, say it like it is. If something is bad, say that it's bad. And B, conduct those bad reviews, right? Negative reviews. Actually do it. I'm just saying I understand why people often don't.
Oh yeah, no, I
I
mean it's
understand why there's a preference. Why if someone
you
says,
get
"Hey,"
backlash. You
well,
always get
the
backlash.
backlash is one thing, but I also think like this isn't going to be a video or a piece of written content or whatever that people are interested in, because this is a product that everybody already doesn't give a shit about. I think the flip side is
Okay,
when
well,
there are,
what if it's something that other people
yes,
like but you
yes.
hate?
So then absolutely that is stuff where it's like, yeah, I mean I do that. That's my wheelhouse. um,
I still think, punch down a bit, right? Like gravity assist.
well, but I mean, you have to be able to say no to because otherwise, if you like, you would never get anything done. You have to be selective about what you actually choose to cover, and so really the operating principle there, at least for me, isn't whether or not this thing is good or whether I expect it to be good. It's whether or not this thing is something that people are talking about and interested in, because there's a lot of stuff that isn't. And the really unfortunate consequence there is because, like, in a perfect world, we should be able to just review everything. It's just that we don't have time for that. But the unfortunate thing is that you often miss things that are great because nobody is talking about them, and that's a repugnant conclusion. That's something I don't. That sucks. And so when I find something that is kind of obscure that I think is great, I still want to talk about it. Cadenza 12 or whatever it was, right? That was great. Nobody really. There wasn't a popular video. It didn't do well, but I still felt it was worth talking about because Jenny came up and was like, "Hey, try this," and I was like, "Oh shit, this is really good."
I do think it's worth doing more stuff about things that are popular, because there are a lot of things that are popular that are pretty bad.
Yeah, I in that sense, I completely agree. I mean, if there's a reason to talk about it, whether you like it or hate it, if you should, and I think you should. Yeah, I think you shouldn't be afraid of saying that it's bad, especially if it's popular.
We have a lot of hot takes about the Beatles being pretty bad.
I mean, those are hot takes.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's not super hot among a certain generation. There's been kind of a backlash against the Beatles. I would personally call the Beatles pretty mid. I
Companies
know.
have no incentive to make better products without negative reviews. I'd say they have less incentive.
Yeah, because the thing is, companies do still care about your experience of a product because they want to sell to you multiple times.
To get back to the Beatles thing, um,
Oh,
I
what have
think
I done?
they're not recorded very well. Like
Oh yeah,
those
terribly.
recordings are pretty bad. So that's
They also have some really bad songs though.
number 9.
Yellow Submarine.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say I think Lucy and the Sky with Diamonds is pretty bad.
I think Strawberry Fields is kind of bad.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So yeah, no, they're definitely overrated. I think most people
Yeah,
can agree on that.
yeah,
Which is what usually what people mean when they say they're unlistenable. They just mean, oh, it's not the
yeah,
zenith of music.
yeah. I have the same opinion
Listen,
about early Pink Floyd. I think that stuff is
I have this opinion about all
just
Pink Floyd.
self-indulgent madness. Amagama and Adam Hart Mother are
I have
unlistenable.
never liked Pink Floyd. And this makes me sound like an asshole because I like Tool, and I
Oh, I
feel
like
like
Tool. I quite a bit like Tool.
yeah, well, that just makes us assholes because
Yes,
Tool is just Pink Floyd for our generation.
yes.
But
Um,
anyway,
Pink Floyd is the keyboard player for Pink Floyd. Actually, Pink Floyd, all the musicians are very talented. Um, I'm not sure about the drummer, but Wright, the guy the keyboard player, he died recently. Actually, he wrote a lot of their music, and he was phenomenal. And I will stand by the take that Dark Side is probably their best album. I guess that's not really a hot take.
someone said Blaine should do headphone reviews. That's a very hot take.
Blaine should do headphone reviews.
Yeah, that's an extremely hot take.
You can.
I
You want
have,
to.
I mean, if I did, people would rapidly realize that they don't want me to do headphone reviews.
Yeah, I suppose. Okay.
Lichtenberg says AI models can be used to find in FR everything that is not in FR, but no one's doing it publicly because it will destroy the high-end industry.
Wait, did you just read that one before because it had oh, an aubergine as the emoji?
No, I just saw my name and I was like, what?
Okay.
Also, I figured it'd be fast to address because it's a bad take.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, what was the recent one?
AI models can be used to find in FR everything that's not in FR, but no one's doing it publicly because it would destroy the high-end audio industry. Appreciate the energy. Don't think you're right.
Yeah.
I think that hypothetically machine learning could find some correlations there.
You would need to have a lot more Hatzes.
You would need a lot of data
Yeah.
and you would need a lot of impression and you would need a lot of time to sort the signal from the noise. And when you got your results, it's definitely not going to destroy the high-end audio industry.
That's true. Yeah. Um, all right. Spicy clarification from listener. My meaning is that, on today's topic, IEM reviewer slash listener's idea of accuracy is tied to their expectations of how past IEMs have performed, not how they ought to perform. Yeah. I think you're right. Um, and that's also in part because of 7-Eleven, no? Well,
Well,
it's for two. It's in part 7-Eleven, and it's also in part IEF.
yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, Kryn is powerful by Red, by the way, but I
I
don't
mean, I
think he's
like it.
absolutely powerful.
You and your red shilling.
Okay, so
You're
I've been
just doing
thinking.
this to antagonize certain people, aren't you?
I do it to troll you among others. But I will say one thing I do like about Red, and one thing that I'd really like to see more products do, is that it does ship with the ability to adjust the tuning to maybe I wouldn't say dead center of two segments, but it's still giving people a way to adjust the tuning based on their own preferences is a really nice feature, and it's something that actually reflects the variation of human preference really nicely. And
Yeah,
I think that's cool. But
yeah,
also, I do it to annoy people.
yeah. I mean, most of the people who were expecting it to be something that it wasn't. Just price it higher next time, Gren.
Let's see. A bunch of multiple people have said that measurements have caused every IEM to be basically the same. Is that true? Like, I don't care about
No, no, but I
IEMs,
get.
so I don't really know.
This reminds me of a point that what's his name? Bad Guy Good Audio Reviews made a long time ago, which is that it was something along the lines of like, well, this is safe, and companies are they know that this is what's likely to sell, and then it's sort of like a vicious circle, right? Where progress doesn't really happen because of what they know is bound to work well in the existing paradigm of like what's reviewed and reviewer targets and things like that. When maybe there are other ways of doing it that could actually be better. It was something along those lines. And I can understand that. Um, I think actually Dr. Olive weighed in on this a little bit as well, and I think his stance on it was that things should trend in a particular direction, and there should be a common result, ideally.
Well, that's the circle of confusion thing, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
Sean's. I'm sad that we didn't get enough time to sort of address Sean's take on the whole accuracy thing because I think it's a very elegant one.
Hmm.
But the reason that he's for that is because he really does. He is concerned about the circle of confusion, and having a standard for headphones really is core to avoiding that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that I quite agree with his take on that particular. Well, I found that one particularly interesting because it was specifically not Harmon. So that's why I thought it was kind of interesting that he was in favor of it all going in that direction. But I also I understand that that's kind of related to the circle of confusion. Um, but I don't know. I tend to think that fundamentally things shouldn't all sound the same. There is room for some sort of editorialization, and art at the eardrum is a thing.
I mean, I
In
just think that ideally there's products for different preferences. I
Yeah.
mean, the alternative. Okay, so there's with EQ, with DSP headphones, probably they should all conform to an average and then just have different profiles, right?
So would you go with 3 profiles, or would you have it be more segmented?
That's a very hard question. I mean, like, based on the body of the lit that we have, my impulse would be to say headphones should probably ship with between one, like between two and three profiles based on the largest segments of listener preferences that we know about, and then with simple and easy to use equalizers that will allow people to individualize from there.
At places that make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with
That's
that.
I mean, that's a very cold take, right?
Yeah.
For
But
but for
somehow,
passive stuff, if you don't have an easy way of adjusting it, I do think that there's a
yeah.
merit to having different, different courses for different courses.
Yeah. It is mind-boggling to me somehow that, you can have fully functional apps and different sound profiles, but never in the, like, just, it's like your filters are not in the right spot.
Yeah.
um, Anyways, let's go with a couple more spicy takes here, guys. Spicy topics. It doesn't need to be your opinions. You could just give us topics that are.
IMs with tuning switches. I like IMs with tuning switches, but I haven't seen one that was like I like the concept, but I've never seen one that was good.
SA6, the original, made sense.
Did
It
were
was literally
were
just
the
more bass.
actual Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, here's one. We need to see more resolve hatred of anime waifus on packaging. Now, does that mean you want my hatred on the packaging, or you want my hatred on waifus?
Of the packaging. So they want you to review more stuff with waifus and hate on them.
Okay.
I actually have a question. Would you be angry if it was a husbando?
What is that? Just the male version?
Yes.
I don't really think that I'm angry even at the. I don't actually.
Would you have the
I just
same
am
disdain?
Yeah. I just don't care. Like, I don't. It's not that
He's an equal opportunity
it
hater.
does. It does literally nothing for me. It is of zero interest to me. Either way, like it could be, you know. I like packaging that has frequency responses on the box, and so even for the ones that do have waifus on them, I think great, do that. So I'm supportive of any kind of packaging that does that. Whatever else is on the front.
Oh, dude, don't say that. Now you're just tempting them.
Okay, I to get to the heart of this, I also am not a fan of, yeah, the cartoon children in general. Not, I mean, there's a whole bigger question there and a bigger topic there, and we could get into that. But for me, it's specifically because it has nothing to do with the product or with audio or anything at all. It's very irrelevant. And so, in my mind, it's like, well, you could do that, or you could do like something that actually has the picture of the thing on the box. I don't know. What do you think?
About waifus on boxes?
Yeah.
I mean,
Are you going to collect
I'm
them
not a
all?
big fan of the Japanimation, to be honest. The like, is it going to stop me from buying a headphone? Definitely not. It doesn't appeal to me. It's like, a lot
Yeah,
of tech has that now, right? Like you can get an anime girl edition of a graphics card or a monitor or something.
sure.
I kind of wish that, like those things, they upcharged for it so that I could just pay less and not have it.
Yes.
Um,
Hey, that's a good business strategy. Moondrop, where you at? Let's make that happen. Give me like a matte gray packaging, and then upcharge people $30 for the waifu editions.
Dang says, man, I just want the matte black box with the product name experience for everything. Yeah, no, I wouldn't. Honestly, I'm fine with a brown cardboard box.
Yes,
Like,
brown
it's
cardboard
just
box
going
for the
in,
win.
it's going in the recycling bin anyway, you
Yep.
know?
Although not necessarily everything, because I mean there really is a collect 'em all element to a lot of the like the cartoon child products. Like,
Okay, so listen,
no, because they actually
that's
come
a
with
mental sickness.
what, the cartoon child thing.
No, collecting IEM. Well, I mean, maybe that I don't
That
know
too.
about that one, but collecting IEMs is a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sickness.
No,
Yes.
but they have the little stands that have I don't I think they're supposed to be like little holders for your IEMs that you can
Wait,
drape them
what?
over. Yeah, they come with these little, I don't know what they're called. Someone
Oh
in the
God,
chat, let me
every
know what they're
hobby
called.
is turning into the keyboard subculture. People are going to start having racks of these things. And then they're going to start getting different colorways.
Yeah,
And then they're going to start
acrylic
lubing
is
them.
it acrylic waifu stands. That's what it is, and they are this particular cartoon child that's on the front of the box. And so like there are bound to be people who have like a collection of IEMs and they have their particular cartoon child.
I never ended up in rehab after buying an IEM. Maybe you should have ended up in rehab.
Uh, anyways, that's all the packaging stuff. I mean, to me, ultimately, it doesn't matter, and people want to do that. If the IEM is good, that's all I care about.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm more sort of hostile to packaging than most because I look at how it affects like MSRPs. Like I think a lot of people don't realize how expensive those little aesthetic things are,
Right.
particularly for cheaper stuff, but even up to the mid prices, they can be a meaningful part of your BOM cost, and that means they have to be multiplied into your total retail cost. And it's just like it feels like a waste to me, but obviously it isn't because people want that, right?
All right.
It's
In
just
your, I was gonna
old
say in
man
your,
yells at cloud rather.
but in your view, who does the best packaging for headphones or IEMs?
I mean, the packaging that is probably the closest to my take, or to my taste, would be random AliExpress sellers, which will just ship it in like a taped up cardboard box, and then inside that is whatever hard case fit it. Like that's the closest to what I want,
But out of the
just
like brands, say,
out of real brands.
yeah. So it says, "Wow, Resolve, you hate waifus and grunge. I feel targeted." Yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, like Odyssey's hard cases, if you like that sort of thing, could be nice.
I quite like
Hyphaman's
Focal's.
eco boxes, if you
Oh
like
God,
that. I don't like Focal's
Hyphaman's eco
boxes.
boxes. No, no, thank you.
Well, at least they're cheap. Like the
That's
Focal
true.
boxes,
They
the
are
problem
cheap.
is that they're expensive. I
Yeah,
don't want to pay $40
I
equivalently
I
for
like
that sort of packaging.
I like the Focal cases, not specifically that shape, but the idea that like rather than like like Hyphaman used to do the big boxes with the like and same with the
The
Odyssey.
wooden boxes,
Yeah,
yes, I
the
have
wooden
one of
boxes.
those
Yeah,
laying around
but
somewhere.
then also the like even the Odyssey boxes, they've gotten a lot better. But they, what the one I'm talking about, the current standard one. I have one over there. Those aren't as easy to put into a bag or a backpack as like a Focal hard shell case. So I like headphones that come with that that type of case. Hi-Fi has, I think the Aria actually has a hard shell case that comes with it as well, that you can put into a backpack. So stuff like that is useful, I think. But
I
as
think
you're
I
saying, I
would
mean, it
rather
does.
if something had a hard case, I would rather that be a shipping box. Like I
Mm,
okay, admittedly, I've bought a fair number of surplus like military hard cases, and they always just get shipped by sticking a label on them, and it's
yeah,
perfect. Like it shows up, maybe it's a little scuffed. Doesn't hurt the running of it any.
right.
Perfect for hiding a body.
I Jesus. Hobby Talk says Dunu. I have to agree, Dunu does do a good job.
Juno has
Uh,
very nice packaging,
they do. They really do.
but it's too premium for me. I just want something simple and cheap, man.
Yes, but you also know that there are many different factors that go into people's
Well, I know some
perceived
people
value
like
of
the
things.
unboxing experience, right? Like
Yeah.
I think that there should be the thing is I'd really rather that, and I know that you can't do this, but I'd really in my ideal world it would be possible to just have an unboxing experience edition of a headphone. And I know that having more SKUs doesn't actually make sense,
Yeah.
but that would be my ideal here.
I could ship you uh, a thumb drive with it that has a video on it of a personalized, message to you for your purchase.
Well, no, but I mean, you know what I mean. Like,
It's
I
part of the
mean, Odyssey
unboxing.
has the one that's the hard case edition and not for the LCDX, right? You could technically do that for other stuff. It
Yeah.
doesn't make sense
Yeah.
usually, but
I mean, actually, Odyssey. I mean, this gets back to the whole like, you know, headphones. The audio industry should be like the car industry, where you have
well,
different
yeah, I mean,
trims.
of
They,
course, then you try to buy a car and it's like, oh, the trim you want is out of stock.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There are many reasons for it to not take after, but take after that. But I would say Odyssey is the closest.
I think Odyssey does a good job. I like
Yeah,
Odyssey.
yeah, me too. Um, okay,
Let's see.
I
Do we
have a
have
spicy.
anything? Oh yeah,
I have a spicy question for you.
yeah. Oh god.
Top top three audio brands in headphones specifically. You can't talk about speakers. Top three audio brands. Just and like it doesn't need to be like here's the thing.
Up by what metric? Just
So here's the thing.
Blaine?
Here's the thing, right? Like uh there can be every audio company releases duds, or almost every audio company releases headphones that suck. Some headphones that suck.
Okay.
And there are, audio companies where most of the headphones aren't great, but some of them are great, right? So it's like, I
Mhm.
mean more along the lines of like which company and brand, as far as values and all of that sort of stuff, would you rank in your top three? So almost like disregarding like in practice what they end up with. Um,
The
and then I would also ask you,
values.
what's that?
I mean, I'm like,
And I'll also
it's
ask you bottom three as well.
Jesus. All right. I mean, that's such a squishy one though, because like Sennheiser has released an absolute ton of steaming crap, but they've also released some of the best headphones of all
So,
time.
so Sennheiser is actually in my top three.
I would put Sennheiser in my top three. I might
Yep.
even put it as one.
And I agree
Like
with your statement there. Yeah, I I'm right there with you on that.
like uh, the marginal Sennheiser headphone is probably mid at best,
Yep.
but they have some really good headphones. I'd probably say Hi-Fi-Man's next for me.
Interesting.
Um, well, the thing is, Hi-Fi-Man has a lot of headphones that are basically tuned the same, and it's not a bad tuning. It's not perfect, but they do a pretty good job, and they provided a lot of price points.
They have also made
It,
some
the
truly
worst
horrific things.
headphones of
Yeah.
all times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not saying if we're saying which company has avoided releasing turds, none of them make the list. We have to go to a completely different space.
Yeah.
Like you would have, I was
Well,
thinking about that. What company has never or has released the fewest awful headphones? And you know what the funny thing is? It's probably Stax. Because Stax barely ever changes anything.
what about Moondrop?
IEMs aren't real.
Okay.
Probably true though.
Also, it's not, even if we were to include IEMs, they have released the SSR and
They
SSB.
also released a headphone that wasn't super good, right?
It was okay. You mean the dynamic driver one?
Yeah.
I have one in the studio somewhere, but it's the old version. So yeah.
Jeff in chat says, Focal, name a bad focal. All right, here's the list of bad focals. The Focal Spirit Professional, the Focal Listen, the Focal Ilier, the Focal Elegia. Shall we go on?
Hey, if you put the Utopia pads on the Allier, it sounds pretty good.
Oh yes, that's true, but that's not how it was shipped, and also that costs as much as the LG as the Ilier rather.
What?
Don't the Utopia heads cost like $500?
200, I thought. Oh, I could be totally wrong about that.
Yeah, that's like $500.
What if it's 200 for like one? I'm not up on this. Actually, no, but they did make a change with the pads to the Alex, right? So the Alex
Yeah.
is a lot better for that.
The Alex is a lot better than the Ilier. The Ilier was terrible.
And it's just the pads. Yep.
So
Um,
yeah, no, I wouldn't say Focal is in any respect immune to making terrible headphones. They've made a fair few that I would really not want to own, but they've made a lot of good ones. I'm not sure
yeah.
I'd say they're a top three.
So Sennheiser is in there. Hi-Fi-Man's in there. Who's the third?
That's the trouble, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
trouble. Honestly, I know it. No, it's simple. It's automatic.
Interesting. I thought IEMs weren't real.
IAMs aren't real, but like if I have to
If
go for
IEMs aren't real, how can Etymotic be real?
that's a good question. But no, but like there, I have heard the worst Etymotic, the high isolation one, and it was still fine. Like Etymotic has actually never completely missed.
Hmm. Okay.
So I would say that those three would probably be my pick.
Okay.
Paul McCollum asked me what made those focals bad. The Liston was just timbrally weird. It had very dark treble, a weird dip in the lower mids, and it just did not sound right to me, and it was unergonomic.
I haven't
The
actually heard
Spirit,
that one, to be honest.
the Spirit series were basically putting your head in a vice with ear pads that were comically thin, and
So,
it broke all the time.
do we know if Focal even made those?
Like made them, or like they
Yeah,
branded them. They
they
might not have
branded them at
designed.
least.
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Um,
not sure either.
the Ilier just plain sounded awful. The treble is the most wrong of any focal that has ever existed, and it really sounds like a much worse Odyssey, which wasn't on my list for a reason. The Elegia has all the same problems as the Ilier, and also if you don't couple it perfectly to your head, it has no bass or lower mids.
So I agree with the second part of that statement. Disagree with the first part.
Okay,
I
it
think
is admitted.
The Eligia's problems are very different from the Ilir's problems.
Okay, that's fair. It has strident upper mids, which the Ilier doesn't have
It
nearly as much, and it
The
has that
Eligia's
weird
problems are it's just the mids and
and the bass
bass
and the
like
treble.
coupling. No, I would actually argue that the treble is okay, and I'd say
I
the treble is
oh,
actually good on the Eligia. I would say
oh, that's controversial. What are you saying? Like 4K plus is good, or are you saying
roughly.
2K plus is
No,
good?
not 2K plus.
Okay, I can agree with 4K plus is
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
but it's horrible below 4K.
It is a very timbrely weird sound
Yeah,
below 4K. I'll agree with you there. Um, and the coupling issue. The coupling issue is probably the biggest one there.
it's just a flawed headphone in a lot of ways. Every other closed focal since then has been better.
Yeah, they've. I mean, it's funny if you compare like the Radiance to the Elegia, it's like night and day.
Yeah, and the Celestia and all those.
Yeah, yeah, all of them Celestia as well. That was I think the first one where they really dialed in the tuning was the Celestia. I just wish it
So
didn't clamp as much.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, they're great with these ones, the open backs. For
the
whatever
the
reason, the
worst
closed ones
ones
clamp.
is also hard.
Um,
Oh,
I
Bravo obviously takes the crown, right?
okay.
Because Bravo makes headphones with multiple drivers without crossovers. Like that's literally a priori wrong. Like that's just the wrong way to design something.
Okay.
Grado, because they literally made a headphone that was a worse version of the HD 414 30 years after the HD 414 came out. And for some reason, people think they're classic, even though they're younger than like the DT 880, and none of the things they've ever made are better than the DT 880.
Hmm.
Number three. That's hard. I've never particularly liked DCA headphones sound. I do like the way that they're
I don't
built
think you
quite
can
a
put.
lot.
I don't think you can put DCA in the bottom three because
Yeah.
they do certain things that like. Okay, even like we can be critical of the sound, but like at the very least, those products are well made.
They're well made, and I think that like the Eon
Oh,
Closed
Audio
was
Quest. There you
quite
go.
tolerable. Audio Quest, I mean, they're out now, right? So
Yeah,
it's
they
not
don't.
as
It's not about the company. It's about
yeah,
it's
but
Skylar Grey
like
headphones in particular.
yeah,
Not to call him out, but like he was the one
yeah,
who
the
did
Night
those.
Owl
Yeah,
and the Nighthawk were
yeah.
really bad. So Audio Quest is probably deserves it because they literally never had a
However,
headphone that was listenable.
unbelievably comfortable. They did that right.
Not quite as large as I would like.
I mean, big head problems, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean, so what
here's
about you though? What
well.
about you though?
So sorry, what was your third one? You said?
Audio Quest.
Oh, okay, just the headphones. Okay. Um, where would you put Abyss in that? Out of curiosity.
Why are you trying to start beef?
It's not. I'm not trying to start.
Why
I'm
are
just
you
curious.
trying to start
I'm curious because these
conflict?
are headphones that we know measure kind of oddly, and well, actually, no.
I would
Apparently,
put Abyss much closer to Audio Quest than I would put it to Sennheiser.
some of the new ones actually measure a lot more normal, right? Like the Diana T. Whatever the new Diana is. I don't know the name of the thing.
I
They measure a lot more
mean,
normal.
it's conceivable to me that they're on a path of improvements.
I think they're lower distortion. I have not had one into value. I have no idea, but that's why I'm curious if. I mean, because a lot of this also comes down to like just the concept of what they're trying to do. And for some brands, it's like it's all about going deep into esoterica to find something special. And for others, it's like high precision, like Sennheiser, for example. And even though they've produced
Although
duds
calling
along,
Sennheiser precision is pretty ironic, given that like Sennheiser varies between incredibad and pretty goddamn
no,
perfect.
for the actual for the products, but I'm saying
Oh, but
like,
for the
yeah,
manufacturer,
yeah, exactly, yeah. Um, and
I don't know. I
certainly I
mean,
think
like,
I like that about Sennheiser.
how much variation is there really, though? Like, that's something where I think a lot of people have like,
I suppose that's a
there's
good point. Yeah,
like a lot of people have claimed, for example, that Hyphamans vary a lot. I've measured a lot of the same drivers from Hyphaman, and they have been very similar.
I have actually I have measured a lot of hi-fi mans as well, potentially more than you have.
Yeah.
I have found variation. I
Okay,
have
so
found
like, which ones have you found in variation where?
so in almost all cases so it's not so much variation from like run to run, like or not within the same run. It is run to run. So one run is with one particular type of magnets, another run is with another type of magnets.
Okay.
And among those,
I,
it's like the same model, but you have like whatever revision, and it's like very different.
so I'm not
Across
saying that revisions don't happen. Like, I'm fairly sure that there was some revision between the
even
original
in Sennheiser.
HE560
Yeah.
and successive ones.
Yep. Yep.
But I don't count that as variation because it's not, right. It just means that they have literally changed the
But I
design.
have
Now,
also found
it's bad
variation.
messaging.
I have measured, I want to say maybe 15 Sundaras at this point. Even with like, yes, I know that there was the one revision, right, and that was the pads. But I've definitely found variation among those. And it's like, well, there's a peak in a particular spot on one that's slightly shifted on the other, and
Okay, but that's
the
really
driver modes
small.
are also shifted. So if you were going to EQ, it doesn't matter. I find it doesn't really matter
If
that
you're
much.
EQing Sundara driver
Driver
mode,
modes. Okay, I'm not
you
suggesting
need
that you
to
need to.
stop.
I'm not suggesting you
I'm
need to.
suggesting you need to not.
But what I'm saying is, if people are looking at the graph, right, they're looking at the frequency response and they see that something is sharp at around 4 kilohertz or 3.5 kilohertz, where they make that, they make that adjustment, and it's not necessarily in that place on their headphone.
Jude Collins says EQ addict. Yeah, I think that about sums it up.
Yeah, EQ is glorious. Okay, I'll give you my top 3 and bottom 3.
Yeah.
Number 1, I agree, is Sennheiser. Number 2, and again, I'm not talking about products here.
I hear a hot take.
I'm not talking about always releasing
What
banger
is number
products.
2?
Odyssey.
I mean,
like
Odyssey
Sidecar.
would be like number 5 for me, so I can't say I really disagree, but it's just so predictable.
I mean, if I had the opportunity to collaborate with a headphone brand, Odyssey is at the top of that list. Or it's one of them. I mean, Hi-Fi Man's up there too, but like Odyssey.
Hyphaman is probably the top for me in terms of like just where I see potential, particularly because you could make something cheap.
Yeah, you could do a lot there. But what I like, I'm interested in Odyssey.
I love Sankar's philosophy.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's a great guy as well. So like,
Yeah.
it's just so predictable,
Yeah. Number 3. This is tough. Was number 3. The only reason why I'm hesitant on Hi-Fi Man is just because of some of the recent closeback, like the philosophy behind the closebacks.
Let's be clear. I don't think that Hyphaman has a good design philosophy. In fact, I think that if you look across the history of their product line, you will find that they don't really have much of a product design philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, almost all of their planers have basically the same acoustics, which happens to work very well.
Well, open back ones.
Yes. And almost all their IEMs are quite similar, and that was pretty varied. And their source gear is a crapshoot. And I mean, it's not just. I mean, the thing with Cameron finding the issue with the firmware on the was it the EF500?
EF400, I think.
Yeah, that really left a bad taste in my mouth. On top of the fact that their stuff tends to measure quite poorly.
I mean, they're what, aren't they tube amps or like? Oh, that was a DAC, right?
Yeah, it's a DAC.
Yeah, but wasn't that R2R DAC?
Yeah, well, it's not just that it measures poorly though; it's that it has like an issue in the firmware, and they won't tell people if they have an affected unit.
Yeah,
That
Honestly,
was not
I have
good.
no idea what's going on there. That's one that I don't have enough insight into.
I mean, I don't think this is inside baseball, but from my understanding, like the HiFi-Man NA people don't really have that either because it's like a different wing of the company that was
Could be.
involved in that.
Could be.
So
Yeah.
like I'm not putting this on like saying, "Oh, go lynch Beyond Fong" or something here, but it's just like I would not value HiFi-Man for philosophy,
Hmm.
but I
Right.
do like their open headphones quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. Yeah. I don't know. For me, it's between Hi-Fi Man and Vocal for 3.
Man, the ergonomics just aren't there for Focal for me. I don't know why they make them so heavy.
They're a bit on the heavy side. Yeah.
They're so heavy
And
for no reason.
yeah. But what is okay? I don't know how you're gonna answer this question, but what is the top closed back headphone around $1,000?
Euthanasia.
No, but
God,
I
I
would
mean,
say
like,
it's probably the Radians.
I'm thinking about the closed back headphones around 1,000 that I've heard.
I will
I
say
didn't
worst. I'm
hate,
getting there.
I didn't hate the Martin Logan, the one that you hate, or not Martin Logan, the
Oh, the Mark Levinson.
Mark Levinson. Yeah,
It's so peaky, dude. It's like treble murder at 10K.
I legitimately didn't hear it that way. So, but
Measures
I'm
that way.
not what?
It measures that way too.
Yeah. So, but I'm not sure I'd say it's better than the Radiance.
Oh, certainly not. Surely not.
The thing
Although,
is, I don't think the Radiance is that much better than like how much hot water would I say if I don't think said I don't think that the Radiance is that much better than a DT770?
oh god. I mean,
I don't
both objectively and subjectively in an entirely different world.
I don't agree.
The DT770 is a peaky boy, dude. It is.
It is. I will say again, it varies by pad age, but the
Oh,
770
okay.
is not a good headphone.
Actually, that's one. The 770 is one that I've had the most trouble measuring on the 5128. You know, how, like there was like that question about like, oh yeah, like the flat plate versus the mannequin head, and
Yeah.
if you want to get a representative seal, the mannequin heads aren't necessarily any better, and that's true. That's more difficult. But for most headphones that I measured, it's just a matter of being patient. That's one. The DT770 is one where it doesn't matter what I do. It seems to be a real struggle to get a seal.
I mean, it's not as bad as like the Campfire Cascade or something, but yeah, like
Oh god, the
I
Cascade
have not heard a closed headphone that I think is better than the HD600, and I don't really think
No,
that
there
much
is
of
no
the
closed headphone.
HD600.
Closed headphone?
Yeah.
There are very few open headphones that are better than HD600.
I have a pretty decent list of headphones I would say are better than the HD600,
With EQ.
with and without.
What is that list, out of curiosity?
Okay, I mean, like
I also have a list, but maybe it's short.
HD800, Clear,
Yeah.
Elex. I would say contemporary LCD2s. I would
Wait,
say what?
Contemporary LCD 2s?
Yeah.
LCD 2Fs.
Yeah.
Have you seen the measurement that I did of it recently?
Oh God, did they change it again?
The contemporary meaning 2021 and onwards, right?
Okay, and which pads is this with? Maybe I'm thinking of the prior to
Non-memory
contemporary.
foam. So
All right,
if you're talking about DMS's one with vegan pads, sure.
no, that one's
That's
very
old.
old, but that
Yeah.
one does look pretty decent.
That looks great, yeah.
But no, maybe I'm talking about like vintage of 2017 to 2019 than LCD because I didn't. Is it
2017 to
even?
2019 are the worst ones because that's the memory foam era.
I don't know, dude. I'm a boomer. I don't remember when I last tried
What
an
year is
LCD2.
it? Actually, no, I could be misremembering. It could be 2018 to 2020. It could be 2018 to 2020 as memory foam.
Yes, this is the summer of 2017. Very good.
We're talking about
vintage
vintages like it's wine.
Well, I mean, yeah, this is what revisions do to us.
Yeah.
But no, I
I'll
mean,
send you the
honest.
measurements of
No,
the
I
new
take
ones.
that back. I've never heard an LCD2 that was overall better than the HD600.
Yeah.
The
like with EQ, it changes the conversation because it's like, yeah, you can
The
like
Utopia,
obviously you can make the LCD2F better than an HD600 because it has bass extension.
like
Um,
the Utopia is better. The
you said clear
I would
already, right?
yeah, I said the Clear, I said the Alex. I mean, all of the open vocals are better. Um, Sundara,
You go Sundara instead of over HD600. I
yeah,
can see the argument. I really can. It's I mean that was the point of that comparison in that video I did recently, where it's like, yeah, I mean, one of them. I mean, I would EQ both of them, but what you can EQ on one of them is meaningfully more than what you can do on the other one.
the weird shaped hyphomans in general probably
The
around the
the Eggy Mans,
same.
yeah, I think you're
Yeah,
right. The
I'd
Edition
say the same
XS
or
and those,
better. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm with you.
Um, let's see. Is there anything else on the market that's worth buying? Honestly,
Susvara.
you know what? Fucking lambdas. I think that
Hmm.
lambdas very variable by coupling, but I think that the lambdas that can couple, if you like a bit more of a bass light sound, and basically if you're in the people who like less bass than Harman and the thicker lower mids bug you, I think you might enjoy a lambda over a Stax lambda over HD 600, and I would say I did. I'm not
Hmm.
sure it wasn't worth the price difference to me, but you know,
Yeah. Okay,
let's
so I'm going
no,
with
there's a list of things that I'd say are better than the HD 600,
yeah. No, that list seems reasonable. Yeah.
but I can't even think of one closed headphone
No, I
that's like
agree. I agree. That is
close
I
to the
can't.
HD
I
600.
I agree. I agree. Um, I mean, my favorite closebacks. I mean, they are headphones like the Radiance and the Noir is pretty good. You know, stuff
I
that is
did
like
not
that.
like the Noir. I
I
don't know
mean,
why. Like
it's a bit zingy in the treble.
it
I would
it
say.
just sounded so off to me. I remember that because you were like, "Oh, this one sounds pretty okay," and I listened. I was like, "This just doesn't compel me."
Well, it's because it doesn't have dynamics.
Objectively, it has dynamics. What is whatever there is with it, it isn't dynamics. We
I
can
mean,
measure the
okay.
dynamics.
So it lacks Wittgenstein. It
Yes.
seriously lacks Wittgenstein.
Yeah, it's
Um,
lacking in Quimble.
yes. Okay. My top three: Sennheiser, Odyssey, and Focal for
Yeah,
brands.
bottom three.
Bottom
Obviously,
three,
Grado goes in
yeah,
there.
yeah. So Grado is in bottom three. Um, can, are we saying we can include IEMs?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if you just say knowledge zenith, though, it's cheating.
Yeah. Okay,
Like
okay.
if it's a major IEM company, I feel like it's fair game. But there's a billion IEM companies that are just throw product in shell.
Yeah. Can we include like companies where there's just like one headphone they ever made?
Okay, what company are you thinking of?
Uh, there's um, I was thinking of like one-offs, like for example the Drop Panda. It's technically not. It's technically what was the name of the
I
brand?
would
It
consider
was
that a
Oppo,
drop.
right?
Yeah,
But
but
you
but it was an Oppo. I would consider that a drop product, and I think that you would have to put it in with the other drop
okay,
products.
but actually some of the drop products are good though. So
Yeah, exactly. That's so.
yeah, you can't do that.
Also, if we included companies that only ever made one, I would have said Flare Audio, which made the worst over ear in history,
Right. Okay.
which is impressive.
Okay. Okay. Um.
But they only ever made the one, and it was just a meme that
But
barely
oh,
anyone bought.
by the way, this doesn't make my top three because I've been fairly critical of a lot of the sound of the products. But as far as like build and all of that
And
stuff,
here we go.
no,
It's time to shill Meza.
I'm not kidding. Their stuff, you have the
I
lyrics.
know. I
It's
have a
really well
lyric.
made.
Mesa stuff is wonderfully made. It's ergonomic.
Yeah,
I love everything about Mesa except for the sound.
yeah.
Like their industrial design and their mechanical design is fantastic.
And I got to say, the people, having met them, they're fantastic people. They are some of my favorite people in all of audio.
Now people are going to think we're bribed by them when it's if
No, but
anything it's more the
if you
opposite. They
go to
keep
like a
getting our money.
if you go to a trade show and you meet them, it's like I think we said this before. Like they're great. Like we did that interview with Antonio.
Oh no, I mean they're listen, there's a lot of stuff to love about them. It's just like It just
But
seems gratuitous to bring them up in this.
I'm just bringing it up because we're not talking strictly about like products that have been, amazing, right? Like, or brands that have
And they
knocked out
are.
amazing products.
I
Um,
wish that boutique headphones were all designed with the same care and elegance as Meza stuff.
exactly. That's all I'm saying. Um, I still need to do what? Two more bottom, right? Because I got
Two
Grados.
beds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one other one I was thinking of. Oh, yeah. Ultrasound. Uh,
Oh God, we're bringing the corpses up from deep in the graveyard. It's only a skeleton now. When
no,
was the
they're
last
still
time
making headphones.
ultrasound was?
They must be.
Do you know that? I don't
No, I
even
don't.
know if
But
ultrasound still exists.
that's a good question. I mean, now they may be collector's items at this point.
I mean,
No, I think they do. I think they do.
I mean, they
Um,
probably do. It's not like being bad ever killed a company, but like, okay, hold on. All right,
so
they
like
have models that I don't recognize. So
the
yeah, I
the
do think
crazy
that
thing
they are
is
still in
the build
business.
quality on the one that I evaluated was also pretty good. It's
Yeah,
and
but
it,
they're so ugly
I didn't. Well, yeah, they are, but I didn't mind using the pro. I thought using the product was it was good to use it, but
until you hear it.
but it was just weird sounding. I don't know. Like I couldn't really. Obviously, it measured quite strange, but
It's a very charitable way to frame it.
yeah, it was just odd. And but it's like that was supposed to be their improvement over the one that Tile roasted them for, right? And it's like, well, if this is better, maybe it's not great. And then what else? Okay, what else? I have okay. This is technically mean, unnecessarily, and I don't intend it to be
Oh, good.
because I haven't heard everything from this company. But from what I have heard, Kennerton.
What have you heard from Kenderson?
I've heard two of their headphones, so I haven't heard the some of the more like they do some stuff that's like horn headphones, or they do stuff that is
Like they have the Kennerton Magni and stuff,
yeah,
right?
the Rognier and that stuff. And I haven't heard a single one of them where I thought this is good. Actually, okay, that's not fair because they are a real company. There's that I don't like their stuff, but they're definitely not bottom three.
I don't know. I
There's
mean, I can't think. I haven't ever heard any of them. Like I haven't heard the Venga or the
yeah.
whatever.
No, I've heard a bunch and I went, oh, I
Oh no,
don't
I
get
say
it
it's
with
the
these ones.
Heartland.
Yeah. No, they shouldn't. I take that back. Kennerton shouldn't be in the bottom. Um, hmm. This is a tough one. Andover,
What did Andover make?
PM50, the worst headphone in existence.
That's not true. It is not the worst in existence. It may be bad. It isn't the worst. The Flare Audio R1 is the worst, and it's not close.
Okay.
Like the
How
R1,
much is the Flare Audio?
well, it was $750.
Okay, then that's fair. I think this one was only like 400.
And it was a Kickstarter product, I think, and the frequency response looked like an A.
Yeah, but that's okay. Yeah, that is still worse because the PM50 is basically like hardcore bass roll off, treble roll off, no ear gain. Because it gets lauded as being flat.
All right. So I'm gonna can I share my all right, we're in Discord. I can't share my screen. Just need to be sure not to share the wrong screen. Good heavens, what screen is this? God, I really have become a boomer.
Someone is saying Spirit Torino.
So no, look at this. Then this is independent direction.
That
it
actually
doesn't
does
matter.
look-
Look how bad this is.
That does look like similar to the Andover PM50.
This is the worst.
It does look worse though. Yeah, I will grant it does look worse.
I have never seen as bad of a headphone. Oops,
But-
I accidentally doxed my cousin.
Is that
it's their Discord profile?
was that the only product that they made?
They have made IEM since then.
Okay.
So they
What
haven't
about
made, to my knowledge, another over-ear headphone.
what's that company? Erzatich. I haven't heard.
I have never heard one.
Okay,
I would
I heard one of
imagine
them. It was
I
not
would
great.
imagine they're bad, but
Yeah,
I
I
don't
haven't heard.
know.
Yeah, so we can't. I don't think it's fair to say these are bottom three if we
I'm
haven't
going to
heard.
imagine the sound in my mind and
You
predict
can't.
that
You
they are
can't do
bad.
that. You can't.
Do you doubt
Um,
my oracular vision?
yes, I doubt anybody's. Okay, what did I say? I said Grado. What was my second one? Oh yeah, ultrasound.
Yeah, ultrasound.
And
Yeah,
then the
just
third
kicking,
one is Bear
kicking
Dynamic. I'm just gonna go with that.
dog. Wait, really?
For yeah, I don't like treble murder.
I mean, I can
This is my
see
spicy
it.
take.
Yeah, it's
They're
a spicy
uncomfortable.
steak.
They sound like shit. I'm sorry.
It's a spicy one. It's a spicy one.
Yep. And I've still recommended that headphones.com sell them. Because
I mean,
no amount of me screaming into the void about how much they're meh for whatever reason is going to change the public narrative about the DT 1990 Pro.
yeah. I mean, I don't really know why, because it was basically the same as the whatever the one before that was, the Amphion or the Amaron or whatever it was,
I
and
mean,
that was
Amaron
not
wasn't
well
as
liked.
it was not as peaky.
And
It
well,
didn't have. I had both. I did review both actually.
so you think the Amaron was better?
It was better because it was more comfortable for sure.
Jesus.
But
So the 1990 is less comfortable than the Amaron?
it's heavier. The Amaron
Jesus Christ.
was reasonably comfortable, I thought. But yeah, I can't think of a single Bear Dynamic headphone that has been good. And I've owned Bear Dynamics before. Like I actually owned the DT880.
I would say the DT880 is good.
Okay, DT770. I will say, DT770 with worn pads. I'll give it to it. I think it is. I recommend it. So.
What? Are you streaming, or is this? Oh no, I'm. For some reason, my stream is way behind the time.
Oh, Tiger 300R. It was okay.
Best and worst drop headphone. I mean, that one's obvious though.
The Panda is the worst.
Well, no, because they have an ultrasound now, so that's almost certainly the worst.
I bet it's not as bad as the Panda.
I will bet. I'll take that bet.
Okay, that's true.
And the best one is also easy. It's the 6XX.
Yeah, by far. Well, they also did the Alex though, and you just said the Alex is better than the HD600.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the Alex is better. I feel like as a value proposition, the 6XX is better, but I will say the Alex is, in my opinion, a better headphone.
Yeah.
So no, that's fair. I will retract that.
So those are my three. I'm sticking with Bear Dynamic in the bottom.
Extremely controversial.
It's not the very bottom, but it is in the bottom three.
Loser of the bet needs to wear a waifu costume next stream. You don't want to see either of us in those. Also, Jeff Grigsby has a question for you about the Allegias. You tried a bunch of pads in those, right?
I did. I thought the default Allegia pads were the best. But if you did want bass, the Deconi ones bring it back. I just think why not use the default ones in EQ, because the treble response kind of gets messed up if you use the Deconis. So I just use the default ones and add EQ.
We have one hot take from Danger Zone, which is, why do some people have such a beautiful mind that they can hear a difference between headphone cables, and some people are so hearing challenged that they can't hear a difference with EQ?
What? No. What?
I think he's satirizing people who say that EQ it doesn't make enough of a difference, but I don't know.
No, but okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding this take. I probably am. But there's like the idea of EQ ruining technicalities, which might be like, how can someone who can you do that again?
No, I will not do that again. Because if I do that again, someone's going to make a GIF out. Someone probably already will.
Please,
make a GIF.
Someone do that. Listener, make it happen if you're still here. No, but I think you understand what I'm getting at.
Wait, why does one eye move more than the other? Is something wrong with my eyes?
I don't know. So someone says hot take EQing makes the sound worse if you do it badly. Yes, you can EQ things into oblivion. Yes.
I would probably even say that the marginal EQ makes things worse, right?
Okay.
Like the
What?
average.
Yeah. What is your take on Spirit Torino? I haven't heard enough of their stuff, so I don't know.
I haven't heard any spiritual.
Oh,
I do
okay.
know that they use push pull. They use two,
Isobaric.
yeah, isobaric
Yeah.
push pull. Anyway, the it's a bad idea. And everything I've heard about them is that they make headphones that nobody I know has really liked. I think I heard one person who found one of them interesting, but
Well,
I have
DMS
never
likes
heard them
them, right?
myself. But he does?
Well, well, I don't know if he likes them, but he found it interesting that they were doing an isobaric loaded headphone.
It's it's really not.
It's I was gonna say they do this in IEMs all the time.
It's it's not interesting there either.
um,
People keep stealing speaker texts that kind of made sense for speakers and then adapting. Like, I'm just waiting for when we see AMT tweeters come to IEMs because it'll happen and it's
okay,
gonna suck.
so listener has clarified his take here. The take is that it negatively impacts technicalities. Speaking of EQ, my take is that changing FR is always going to affect technicalities, but thinking it can only do so negatively is dumb.
Cold take.
Yep, agree. Cold take. Get spicier, listener. Uh,
AMT IEMs exist. God damn it.
no, okay. Okay. Here's a. I have a. This probably isn't as spicy as I think it is, but people who, for, you know how like people get all kinds of false confidence from subjective reports about detail and whatever else. I think equivalently people can get all kinds of false confidence that leads to them having
Nocebo also exists in
yeah.
addition to placebo, yes.
Well, look at no, but also I think looking at FR graphs creates its own placebo.
Oh God, yeah.
And I think it's like there's equal amount. Well, I don't know about equal, but there is false confidence either way you skin that cat.
Yeah, I don't really think that it's impossible not to be primed with headphones, right? Like that's
Yeah,
why in the Olive research, Sean didn't use the headphones on anybody, right? Like he used a headphone equalized to match
yes,
their response. Paul McCollum says FR tells only part of the story. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that your experience will always be impacted by things that aren't necessarily in the sound.
yeah,
And that's just unavoidable.
and it's like even as simple as literally just like having someone hand it to you, like we can take away everything else like price whatever, even just
Honestly,
brand
just being able
like
to see
seeing
being
it.
able to
Yeah,
see the person who's testing you, like this is one of the reasons people talk about double blinding stuff is because experimenter effects are real, right? Like, and experimenters can absolutely
but
prime
see, okay,
listeners.
what I still want to do, I still want to do the experiment where you take two drivers, like a well
Yeah.
received driver and a poorly received one, and put them in the same enclosure, so that people
Yeah,
and then try them on actual people.
yeah, and EQ them the same.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean
I,
it's DMS, I think are we allowed to say that DMS might have secured some space at a few shows to actually test that?
I mean, we could say whatever we want, man.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, I know he was talking behind the scenes with the big wigs, and I don't want to get, I
Me?
don't want to be wearing cement shoes.
This was your pitch. I just said, yeah, let's do it.
Well, no, this was DM. Well,
Oh,
I mean,
DMS's
yes,
pitch. It was DM.
I mean,
Yeah,
it
you just
was
won the
my
bet.
pitch. Yeah, I just won a bet
Yeah.
because for some reason DMS inexplicably thought you'd be opposed to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. Well, so I think you and I have a sense of what the outcome will be, and that's different from what DMS's sense of what the outcome will be. But
Well, I don't know if we're in agreement. I mean, like, it depends on which ones we pick, right? Like,
yeah, I want to
if
do it
you,
with the Sisvara and the Deva.
oh, well, I mean, yeah,
As I think we
well,
could because the drivers are the shape of the driver
that no, that'd
is
be very easy. No,
yeah.
I mean, that would be that. But do you really think they'll be different?
Well, it's not about whether or not I think they'd be different.
Well, but do you?
EQ did the same.
Yeah.
I think whatever the outcome there, I think it will be disappointing for the subjectivists. And in the for greater definitions, you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
That's the next one, I swear to God. Just one episode talking about, is there such a thing as a
Yeah, but
subjectivist?
every episode is about that. So at some level we get there. Um,
Well, I mean, every episode is about the same things because
so
we're old, and old people just say the same things
so
over and
okay.
over.
Here's the thing though, right? If the outcome is a positive one for there being a difference for technicalities, subjective qualities, whatever we want to call it, then it is also going to be the case that there is some measurable difference, and it might
Okay,
not
wait, so hold
necessarily.
on. So you said if there's a difference in subjective qualities when any other priming is controlled for, right? So when
Yeah,
it's just the
yeah,
sound being compared, there must be some measurable difference in the sound if there is a
some measurable
statistically
difference.
significant
Yeah,
report. Yeah, I would
yeah,
agree with that.
yeah.
Now,
Um,
that's
but
a very
here's the question though: do we have to? Can we do this without in-ear microphones? With a sufficient level of confidence.
all right. Well, since we'd be building these, what I would probably do is in cup
Oh, I
microphones to at
see.
least check the
Get
the
yeah,
seal.
yeah.
I there's gonna be controlling this is the hard part. Like controlling this is always the hard part because you can very easily with any two products show a consistent differentiation, and where you can show a consistent differentiation you can usually show a preference,
Yeah.
but yeah, the controls are going to be the hard part here, and that's going to be the real pain in the ass, and that's why I'm very happy that Douglas volunteered to do a lot of the legwork there because I don't want to do much of the actual making sure it all works
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, I don't even know if I'll be able to go to Can Jam because I'm banned from the States now.
That's true. Well, I mean, to be fair, that is a good thing.
Keep me in the
We
north.
don't need
Keep me on
any
this
more
side
of
of the
your
wall.
kind, filthy Canadians coming into my country.
Hey, Sean takes umbrage with that.
Well, I mean, my ancestors were also Canadians.
Okay.
Some of my best friends are Canadian.
uh,
But yeah, no, and to be fair, that was your fault.
no, it was Tara's fault.
Oh wait, is Taryn the one who told them?
Yeah.
Oh
Technically.
my
Well,
god.
okay. Nobody said it was for work.
But
Taryn mentioned that that I was doing content. But the thing is, okay, the only reason why we were turned around was because uh, we Canadians get revenue from the YouTube channel, and it wasn't to do with anything else
yeah,
about that. So in theory, I could have just been like, well, I don't need to monetize this video, but there's no way for them to verify that, It's just the
you
fact that
just
some of our videos are
listen.
monetized.
If you don't, okay, so formally, the legal thing here is if you're going to make any money for anybody, you have to get a work visa or the proper like. There's some other visas depending on your country to cross the border. The practical answer that most people follow is that you just don't tell them and thus violate the law.
Yes. Well, we're a big boy business and we wanted to make.
But not enough to have the correct visa.
Well, actually,
We're actually a
to be
mid
honest,
boy business.
to be honest, it's I'm okay with it because I need, we're going to be working in the States, so I need to get that visa. So I'm not.
But
This
it
isn't.
might be harder now depending on like
Yeah, that's a good point. It might be harder now, but it's better to do everything above board than to be like, I'm visiting a friend, if that option is available. But
oh yeah, no, I
at
mean
the same
I'm
time,
not
we've never had an
recommending
issue in the
people commit
past with.
crimes.
Yeah, no, and we've never had an issue in the past though with doing something like this where it's probably because like we didn't even consider the money, like because it is literally like pennies that you make from a video. through YouTube ad revenue. It's like
Really, we
nothing.
should not even monetize
We really
our
the only
videos.
reason we monetize is so that it gets treated equally by the algorithm.
Really?
Yeah, we don't give a shit about making, however much money we make. It's something like $800 a month for the entire channel, like for all the videos that we've made, which is over 500 videos. So it really is like
A pittance.
it's nothing. So making one video like that,
Well,
they
that buy like
prevented us
3
from making
bananas.
a couple bucks at most over the course of several years. It's not, yeah. Anyways, I am now banned from Freedom Land.
Don't worry, I'll get banned from Canada to make it even.
Yeah, I wasn't bringing enough freedom with me.
I don't think
Sadly.
you have enough freedom in you.
Well, I didn't participate in the Freedom Convoy, if that's what you're wondering.
Okay, and now we just got political, which is not a good space to be in for audio. So I'm going to move this to Lichtenberg, who says reviewers should not be allowed to release reviews before using an earphone for 3 months because good sound with terrible ergonomics and no durability is not worth a purchase.
I mean,
It's a
you could
hot
say that
take.
about any. I think you could say that about any product in general. Like any product
Yeah.
ever, if you have like a couple weeks with it, and you do your review, and then in the next week something breaks, it's like, well, you couldn't have predicted that.
Reviewers are not good at predicting durability. Like,
But how could you?
well, I mean, if you understood how it was built really well and you took it apart, like I'd like to see more headphone reviewers actually look at when they talk about build quality, take it apart and say, how strong are the actual connections? Is this just an aesthetic of durability? Maybe even is this reparable? Like that's
Being reparable is kind of a big one. I mean, that
well, most people won't anyway.
another +1 for the Mezes and Sennheiser.
We also have multiple people saying +1s for ABX testing, so I guess we got to put that back on the menu.
It is on the menu. It is in our weekly discussion, and that's what we want to do.
Nice. Does that mean I should make a new tester?
Not as a priority because we already have them.
True.
Yeah, we could do more. I mean, the thing is though, like I kind of have like a bad taste in my mouth, like a negative attitude towards a lot of it, not because, like I think it's cool to publish the results.
You heard it here first. Andrew is biased against ABXs. Take that immediately to the forums out of context.
People will. No, I have a bad taste in my mouth about amps and DACs in general, because having done the
meant to be eaten.
Yeah, you're doing it wrong. No, having done the ABXs, being at a point now where I'm just like I don't care about amps and DACs, unless something is a meaningful change, and one where it's not just that I sometimes get it right on an ABX, but where it's like I wouldn't need an ABX to know that that's making a difference. I don't care. The apathy is strong for me on amps and DACs. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
but okay,
they're pretty boring topic, right?
I will do one. Well, I'll do more because I've already done them. But I want to do. Yeah, I'll do more. Give my results, and we'll have Cameron do them as well.
Cameron is the interesting one because he actually perceives substantial differences, and he has had at least one ABX where he's showed an effect. Although we still need to do like the proper controls for that. But it is sort of a problem where ABXing for us gets a bit thorny because almost nobody believes in the effects.
Yeah, right. But I am interested in that idea about the harmonic distortion profile, or some of the reasoning that he gave.
Something differing nonlinear transfer function, because it's not even harmonic distortion.
Well, some of it is audibility of that, right?
Well, and it's very level specific.
Yeah.
Like the nonlinear transfer functions of devices are just a whole fucking ball of worms. It's just annoying.
Yeah. But anyways, point being, we'll do it. I'll do some results, and then we'll have Cameron do it as well. unfortunately, I don't have access to some of the stuff that Cameron does, and he may not have access to some of the stuff that I do. So we'll
I
have
mean,
to
we can sort that out,
we'll,
though.
we'll have to coordinate and figure that out. So I don't know when it's going to take place, but yeah, we'll do it.
Haywood X asks, why pay 1,000 if a $50 product has the same sound?
I don't know.
Why pay 10? Pay 100,000
I
if a $50,000 car goes just as fast and
This
is
is
as
my
safe?
point. Or a $30,000 car goes just as fast. Like,
Well, a $30,000 car probably isn't as safe. Is the difference? Because there
is it?
is some, yeah,
I don't know, man.
there is some meaningful segmentation of car safety features. Well, and always, obviously.
Uh, I mean, yeah, there is, but like, you can get a top safety pick under $30,000.
Is it going to be as safe as the top safety pick at 60,000 or 50 though?
Maybe.
Okay, well, the point here in general is people like fancy things.
Yeah, and it's not even about the performance of the sound quality in this case. Sorry, it is like what people think it is, but that isn't necessarily what it should be. It should be about
$300 if the box has no waifu.
I get soft touch on my amp and my DAC. I want that. Although that would kind of get weird because it'd get warm. I want good knob feel.
Oh God! Imagine that, just touching your amp and it's just
like mushy,
squishy.
Someone please make a squishy amp and a DAC. I'll buy it. $10,000. Let's go.
God, and some soft touch gets kind of fuzzy over time too.
It's just like it's like what a Nerf ball looks like after like 10 years of use as a chew toy.
Okay, so our viewership's starting to tail off. Super V says this stream is too long.
That's a good take. So let's cut it there.
I haven't eaten since yesterday, so like.
Well, yeah, you're supposed to eat your amps and DACs. Okay. That does it for the stream. Thanks to everybody for your spicy questions and your comments.
And now they say not long
enough. And thanks to Mr. Blaine for joining.
And big thanks to Andrew for hosting.
Yeah, and big thanks to headphones.com for making all this possible, making the measurement equipment possible, making our review platform possible. And they also have some headphones that you can check out should you be interested.
Thank you to all of you for watching.
Yeah.
And thank you to all of you for buying Red by Critical.
And LTT Store, something about LTT Store. Okay. On that note, on that terrible disappointment, we'll see you guys in the next one.
You fucking